Chapter 1. The sun was very hot, and the huge fireball in the sky almost roasted people. Renbochin knelt on the ground with sweat dripping down his forehead. His bald scalp reflected the sunlight as if it was covered with a layer of wax. It wasn't that he didn't want to move, but that he didn't dare to move as the two knives were placed on his neck. He didn't know what had happened and how it had turned out like this. Looking at the people around him, who were dressed in an ancient style but were different from the historical era, he guessed that he wasn't on Earth. 3 minutes ago, Renbochin was still wearing a singlet and eating instant noodles and surfing the internet in his rented apartment. The next second, he appeared here with a bowl of instant noodles in one hand and a pair of chopsticks in the other. The chair he was sitting on was still there. However, the environment was completely different. Everything that was familiar to him was gone. He appeared in the middle of a road with marching troops on both sides. His sudden appearance had also startled those people. There were shouts and the sound of long knives being unsheathed. Following which, 2 knives were placed on his neck. After that, he knelt here. The bowl of instant noodles was half a meter away on the ground. It was mixed with the soil and emitted a tempting aroma. He didn't have the thought of a man having gold under his knees. Or perhaps it should be said that the burly soldiers around him, as well as the shining weapons in their hands, as well as the austere atmosphere of the army, made his mind almost go blank. He seemed to be in the marching troops. When he landed, he happened to be in the marching troops. "Who are you?" A 2-meter-tall man in armor stood in front of him. His small eyes were filled with coldness. Renbochin suspected that if he said anything wrong, the other party would chop him up with a knife. Renbochin. Renbochin didn't know what to say. Right now, her mind was in a daze, and she subconsciously said the name. "Why are you here?" "I don't know either," Renbochin said with a sad face. If crying could change his current situation, he would really cry in front of the other party. Chop. Renbochin was scared out of his wits when he heard this word. At the same time, he felt that the 2 knives on his neck had left their original positions and that his head would fall to the ground in the next second. He quickly roared, "Stop!" Renbochin had never thought that he could make such a loud noise. The man waved his hand, stopping the 2 blades that were about to fall. "What else do you want to say?" Renbochin could feel the wind created by the 2 steel sabers stabbing into his neck, causing a slight pain. His mind spun rapidly as the aura of death pressed down on him, almost suffocating him. From the tone of the man just now, Renbochin was certain that he really wanted to behead him. Not to mention the 2 steel sabers behind him. I want to see your boss. I know how to read, I know math, I know how to farm, I know how to smelt. I'm a talent, and I'm here to work for you. Renbochin quickly shouted out all the things that he knew in his mind. He looked at her expectantly, hoping that she would change her mind. That soldier lowered his head and looked at him. Renbochin could see the corner of his mouth curling up into a smile, but no matter how he looked at it, it looked like an evil grin. "Kill him." "Stop, I haven't finished speaking." Renbochin was scared out of his wits. Did this soldier only know how to say the word behead? What happened? Why did you stop? Suddenly, a female voice came from the back of the group. A woman in the same armor rode over and asked in a deep voice. "Wait a minute." That general waved his hand again to stop the 2 sabers behind Renbochin. He turned to the back of the group, cupped his fists, and said, reporting to the general, "When we were advancing, this person suddenly fell from the sky and into the group. I suspect that this person is an assassin and am preparing to behead him in public." "I'm not an assassin, I'm a talent." "A real talent, please don't kill me," Renbochin shouted at the top of his lungs. At this moment, there was no chance for him to defend himself. If he was not careful, his head would fall to the ground in the next second. Therefore, he could only think of the word talent that would give him the highest chance of survival. Even if the other party didn't care about talent, he could still arouse their curiosity and let them listen to what he had to say, right? Throughout history, no matter where it was, there had always been preferential treatment for talented people. Furthermore, Renbochin knew that he was still somewhat capable. At least he had learned math, physics, and chemistry. He also knew a lot of miscellaneous things and should be able to find something that would interest the other party, right? Noisy. That soldier turned around and kicked Renbochin in the chest, sending him flying. He lay on the ground for a long time and couldn't catch his breath. He almost thought that he was going to die. The female general rode her horse to Renbochin and looked down at him. She said, "Bring him to the side of the road and check the surroundings. If there are no problems, continue forward and I will report to the emperor." "Yes," that soldier replied. Then, he added, "Drag him to the side of the road and send a team to check the surroundings." Renbochin was dragged to the side of the road like a dead dog. At this moment, he couldn't be bothered to resent this person for kicking him. Instead, he secretly looked around and thought about how to save his life. He was surrounded by soldiers armed with sabers and guns. It was impossible for him to escape. He reckoned that his head would fall to the ground in less than 2 steps. Did he hear the female general say "Emperor"? Was she referring to the emperor? He had to think about how to save his life. First, he thought about how he came to be here and concluded that he didn't know. However, he already knew that he happened to be in the middle of the marching troops and was extremely unlucky. Even if he fell into the forest, his chances of survival would be higher, right? He was already considered lucky that they didn't hack him to death the moment they saw him. Secondly, these people spoke the same language as him, which was a blessing in disguise. Otherwise, he would have been thrown to the side of the road and fed to the wild beasts. Looking at the way these people were dressed, they were indeed not from the past dynasties that he knew of. They didn't look like they were from ancient China. Could they be from another world? It seemed like they were in a feudal society and their productivity shouldn't be too high. There were still many things in his mind that were valuable to this world. Furthermore, he knew so many poems, songs, novels, and things that could be eaten and played. Being a sycophant was also valuable. He had to think of a way to let that emperor know how useful he was to him so that he could save his life. Renbochin knelt by the side of the road and his mind was in a mess. After the inspection, the troops continued to move forward. Then, they saw a large cart coming from afar. The rolling wheels pressed against the dirt road and made a dull sound. But, what was pulling the cart? Renbochin looked at the beast in front of the cart. It had the head of a lion, the antlers of a deer, the eyes of a tiger, the body of a moose, the scales of a dragon, and the tail of an ox. It was at least 2 meters tall. Renbochin widened his eyes and said, "Is this a Kirin? A living Kirin? Pulling a cart?" He originally thought that he had arrived in a world similar to ancient China. How did a Kirin appear? Furthermore, it was pulling a cart. Damn it, could it be that he had arrived in a world with high martial arts? The kind that could easily destroy the heavens and the earth and shatter mountains and seas with one punch. Chapter 2. The car stopped not far away from Renbochin. The female general beside the car called out to Renbochin. Renbochin was driven to the side of the Kirin by 2 people, and the steel saber was placed on his neck again. The door of the carriage was pushed open, but there was a bead curtain inside, so no one could see what was inside. They could only vaguely see a person lying inside, and there were people standing next to him. Renbochin forcibly cleared his mind of distracting thoughts. He knew that this was the moment to decide whether he would live or die. "Who's down there?" A cold female voice came from the carriage. It was a woman's voice. Renbochin felt pressured just by hearing this voice. He didn't know if it was because of the knife against his neck, or if the other party's voice alone was enough to deter him. My name is Rinpochen, and I'm from the 3 eastern provinces of China. However, I'm proficient in mathematics, physics, chemistry, farming, smelting, poetry, historical novels, and delicacies from all over the world. I'm sure that I'll be of some use to you, Rinpochen said, trying his best to remain calm. He didn't know what kind of person the other party was, so he could only try to say as much as possible. As long as there was one thing that could please the other party, half of his life would be saved. Oh. China. Never heard of it. What are mathematics, physics, and chemistry? Poems and songs. Tell me about it. That cold voice continued with a hint of indifference. When Rinpochen heard what the other party said, he felt that the other party wasn't very interested. However, since the other party had already said it, he casually recited the most familiar song in his mind. The bright moonlight in front of the window. There were 2 pairs of shoes on the ground. Looking up at the bright moon. Lowering my head to think of my hometown. This poem was really in line with his state of mind. He not only missed his hometown, he missed it to death. At least when he returned, no one would say, "Kill him," every now and then. However, he did not notice that there was something wrong with the poem that he blurted out. "You've got guts. Take him away and behead him," the cold voice said with a hint of mockery. Rinpochen was immediately dumbfounded. Why did they want to chop him again after he had only recited one poem? He finally understood why the soldier in front of him was so easily beheaded. It turned out that they were following the example of their superiors. If the people above were like this, it was no wonder that the people below were like this as well. Barbaric, too barbaric. I also know farming and metallurgy. I know how to design farming equipment to increase production. I also know how to smelt steel and know the pros and cons of various kinds of knives. I can fight against 1,000,000 soldiers alone, Rinpochen shouted in a panic. The 2 men behind him had already grabbed his shoulders and were about to drag him out. He knew that if he was dragged away, he would really die here today. Stop. That lazy voice stopped the 2 soldiers behind Rinpochen from moving. You know quite a lot. The man's words carried a hint of mockery or something else. Yes, I read a lot of miscellaneous books. He also knew how to read novels and tell stories to relieve boredom. He also knew how to cook all kinds of delicious food, which was full of exotic flavor. Mahjong, Pai Gao, and Fight the Landlord can help you relieve your boredom. It also knows how to take care of your skin, keep your skin fair all year round, and remove wrinkles, Rinpochen hurriedly explained. Just now, it was a woman who had been talking, and it seemed like she could decide whether he lived or died. He hurriedly added skin care as well, even if it could increase his chances of survival by 1 in 10,000. He didn't know if his last sentence had moved the other party, but the bead curtain was pulled open. Rinpochen stole a glance and finally saw the person inside. A woman dressed in a bright red robe was reclining inside. Beside her were 2 women dressed in white. One of them was fanning herself while the other plucked a grape from a bunch of grapes in her hand and placed it in her mouth. The woman was in her 20s. Her eyebrows reached her temples, and her eyes were as bright as stars. Her facial features were exquisite, but when paired with her eyebrows, she gave off a heroic vibe. However, the first thing Rinpochen felt when he saw her was cold. Too cold. His entire face was indifferent. He looked at her as if he was looking at an ant, and there wasn't the slightest hint of emotion in his eyes. Another surprise was that when he heard them say, "Your Majesty," he thought it was the Emperor. He didn't expect it to be a woman. Could it be a woman with a high position and power? It seemed like some names in this world were different from those on Earth. The woman's starlight clear eyes looked at him for a while before fixing her gaze on his face. Rinpochen didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the other party's gaze changed for a moment. However, it was only for a moment, so he couldn't be sure. "Where are you from?" the woman asked coldly. "Northeast China." Renbochin felt that his life could be saved, so he calmed down a little. This was because the other party asked him again where he was from. This meant that the other party seemed to be a little interested in him. "Where is China?" "I have never heard of it." "Is it a small country at the border?" The woman's tone didn't change. She reached out to take the wine glass from the female attendant and took a sip. "I don't know where it is, and I don't know how I got here either," Renbochin said truthfully. The person in front of him could decide his life or death with just a word. He didn't want her to hear anything untrue from his mouth. That could very well cost him his life. "What's your name?" "Renbochin." The woman picked up the wine glass and took another sip. No one knew what she was thinking. Renbochin looked as if he was waiting for his judgment. His whole body was covered in sweat, and his clothes were sticking to his body as if he was fished out of the water. "Your Majesty, should I behead him or?" 10 minutes later, the female general at the side broke the silence. This sentence almost angered Renbochin to death. Why was it that the people here, from top to bottom, were only talking about beheading him or beheading him? However, she addressed him as Your Majesty just now, and now she addressed him as Your Majesty. If the words used in this world were the same as those on Earth, then was the person in front of him an emperor? Empress? Or could it be that the two worlds had the same words, but the meaning was different? "Bring him back first," the indifferent woman in the carriage said. The bead curtain was drawn again. Renbochin was carried to the side of the road. He only dared to take a deep breath after a long time. Just now, his heart almost jumped out of his mouth, and his whole body was covered in sweat. He was afraid that the other party would say, "Behead him," again. Now, it seemed that his life was saved for the time being. Looking at the carriage moving forward slowly, Renbochin's mind was filled with that bright red, like blood, like a rose with thorns. After that, Renbochin was in the mood to check out the situation around him. Although the road under his feet was made of dirt, it was wide and flat. In a world without cement, this might be the official road. His surroundings were all plains, and he could see green plants that looked like wheat. When he came here, it was July. It seemed that the weather in this world was similar, and it should be June or July. After walking for half a day, he saw a city. When Renbochin saw it, the only word he could think of was magnificent. Big, huge. The city wall was at least 20 meters tall, which was equivalent to more than 6 stories. It was completely built with huge stones, and it was unknown how much manpower and material resources were used to build it. Both sides of the road were lined with soldiers in bright armor. Outside, there was a dense mass of people. Regardless of whether they were wearing bright clothes or coarse clothes, everyone was kneeling there with their heads lowered, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Inside the city, it was even bigger, and there were shops everywhere. If not for everyone kneeling on the side of the road, it would have been a bustling scene. After walking for 2 hours, they passed through another inner city. Renbochin saw a group of towering and spectacular buildings, or rather, a group of palaces, from afar. This must be their destination. Chapter 3. It was very hot outside, but the dungeon was very cold and humid. When Renbochin was dragged in, he saw a few rats running on the ground. There were 2 metal doors on both sides, and he couldn't see what was going on inside. Soon, he was thrown into one of the doors. The person who threw him in said to the jailer, "Look after the prisoner that Her Majesty wants. Don't kill him." Hearing this, Renbochin felt goosebumps all over his body. If he didn't say this, would he not be able to get out of here alive? He panicked at the thought of this. With a bang, the metal door was slammed shut. Renbochin was left in this cell with a 20 centimeter tall, 1 meter wide ventilation window. Renbochin collapsed onto a pile of straw on the ground. What he had experienced today was too stimulating for his young heart. After a while, he started to worry about his current situation. He hoped that the lady would see him soon, and then he would think of a way to persuade her to give him a chance to show off. Renbochin believed that he was completely different from the people of this world in terms of experience and vision. That was where he would be useful. Not to mention other things, he had to change the current situation where he could be killed at any time. For the next few hours, he lay on the straw and thought about what he should say to the lady to move her. When he felt cold, he grabbed a handful of straw and covered himself with it to keep warm. A squeaking rat came out of a hole in the corner of the wall, giving him a scare. After scaring the rat away, he continued to think while sighing about how good Earth was. There was a small door at the bottom of the metal door, and dinner was pushed in from there. There was a bowl of salt water and a cornbread. The grains were so thick that he cut his throat when he swallowed it. After using all his strength to finish the cornbread, Renbochin curled up in the straw to keep warm and think. He didn't try to ask the jailer outside because he knew it was useless. It was better to save his saliva. The straw was warm, so it didn't take long for him to fall asleep. He had received too many shocks today. Renbochin thought that the lady would see him soon. He didn't expect that after waiting for 3 days, there was no sign of her wanting to see him. Renbochin was a little anxious. Could it be that the other party had forgotten about him? If that was the case, wouldn't he die here? Thinking of such an outcome, Renbochin felt that death would be more comfortable. However, it was useless for him to be anxious. The current situation was that their lives were in the hands of others. He could only comfort himself as he waited in the cell. Another night passed. Before he opened his eyes, he felt that the light was so bright that he could see through his eyelids. After a few days in prison, he had already gotten used to the light in the cell. So he knew at once that he was not in a cell. Renbochin opened his eyes abruptly. Following which, he was dazzled by the surrounding light and quickly closed his eyes. He had been in the cell for the past few days and was not used to the brightness outside. He touched his lower body with his hand. It was still straw, but it was impossible for the cell to be so bright. His hand touched the surroundings again, and he felt a smooth surface with a small crack. These are floor tiles. Renbochin suddenly thought of a possibility. He stretched out his hand and felt around. Sure enough, he felt a wooden table leg. It was his computer desk. I'm back. Renbochin was wild with joy and almost shouted. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Renbochin slowly opened his eyes again. What he saw was indeed a familiar room. The walls were yellowed from the smoke, the computer desk, the computer, and the messy bed. Everything was so familiar. And he was lying on a pile of straw in front of the computer desk. I'm back alive. Renbochin jumped up from the ground. First, he was almost beheaded. Then, he stayed in a dark cell for 3 days. Finally, he returned to this kennel. The joy in his heart was indescribable, and he could only vent his emotions by shouting. After venting for 10 minutes, he finally calmed down a little when someone knocked on his door from next door. Oh no! I disappeared for 3 days. I don't know how the company will deal with me. After calming down, Renbochin suddenly had to face an extremely realistic problem. Forget it, I'm lucky to be able to come back alive. If I lose my job, I'll just find another one. Renbochin immediately comforted himself. Indeed, after walking on the edge of life and death, he could look down on many things a little more. The most important thing now was to come back alive. This was more important than anything else. Although this was what he thought, he still picked up his phone. Sure enough, it was switched off as he expected. He nimbly charged his phone and threw himself onto the bed. It was really great to be back in this kennel again. Even this broken window was so comfortable. Renbochin hugged the quilt and rolled around while sighing. After rolling around for a while, he was pricked by something. At this moment, he realized that there was still a lot of straw stuck on his body. This is the straw from another world. I wonder if it will carry germs or something. Renbochin mumbled as he took off his clothes and threw them to the side. He walked to the mirror and saw his haggard face. His short hair was also stained with a lot of straw. Dong, dong, dong. A series of knocks sounded on the door. Renbochin quickly put on his underpants and opened the door. It was a middle-aged man outside. You're finally back. I've been looking for you for 2 days, and your phone is switched off. What do you want? If you didn't come back, I would have thrown your things outside, the middle-aged man said unhappily. Isn't there still 1 more week? What's the hurry? Renbochin was still immersed in the joy of escaping death. Are you too stupid? It's already been 2 days, the middle-aged man suddenly said. Renbochin suddenly realized a problem and asked cautiously, what's the date today? It's the 17th. The rent is due on the 15th. Renbochin lowered his head and calculated. When he went to that world, it was on the 8th. Today was the 17th, which meant that 10 days had passed. He stayed in that world for 3 days and did not know when he returned to this world. In other words, 1 day in that world was equivalent to at least 3 days on Earth. It's over. Looks like I'm definitely going to lose my job. Renbochin smiled bitterly. If he was missing for 3 days, he could still think of a way to talk. If he was missing for 10 days, he would definitely be fired. I will transfer the money to you via WeChat later, Renbochin said to the landlord and closed the door. Renbochin turned on his phone and looked at the time. It was indeed July 17th. He then looked at his notifications and saw a series of missed calls. A few of them were from his mean middle-aged female boss, a few were from his colleagues, and the last few were from his only friend. When he opened WeChat, there was also a series of messages. Where are you? Why didn't you come to work? The higher-ups are angry. Come quickly. Why did you go missing? You were fired. Come to the company to pay your salary. When Renbochin saw this message, he immediately dismissed the idea of calling the mean middle-aged female boss. She had always disliked him. Now that he was missing for 10 days, he would definitely be fired. He would go to the company tomorrow to pay his salary and find a place to relax for 2 days. After that, he would look for a job. But how did I get over there? How did I come back? When Renbochin thought of this question, his heart was immediately shrouded with a layer of shadow. Chapter 4. At night, Renbochin sat with a man and a woman at a roadside food stall. The man was wearing a blue half-sleeved shirt and jeans. He looked handsome and was Renbochin's only friend, Qin. Sometimes, Renbochin wondered how he became friends with Qin. He was born into an ordinary family and had a selfish and indifferent character. He didn't have the energy to do anything. After graduation, he worked in a small company for a meager salary. On the other hand, Qin was the complete opposite of him. He came from a wealthy family and was handsome and experienced. Wherever he went, he was the center of attention and the object of envy. Now, he had obtained his lawyer's license and was interning at a law firm. He wasn't far from becoming an official lawyer and had a bright future. It could be said that no matter how one looked at them, they were two completely incompatible people. However, Qin liked Renbochin very much. After meeting him twice, they became friends. According to Qin, Renbochin was very similar to him. They both drifted away from the crowd. However, Renbochin felt that he really couldn't fit into the circle of others. Therefore, he stood alone outside the crowd. On the other hand, Chen Qing skillfully maneuvered around that circle and then left to watch the performance of others. Both of them had completely different natures, but they became friends. This was also a strange thing. The other lady was wearing a long dress. She was quiet and elegant, and her name was Jiang Nan. She was Chen Qing's girlfriend. Her appearance wasn't very outstanding and was above average. She was also a very strange person. Chen Qing was handsome and rich. He often hung out at nightclubs and was always surrounded by different girls every day. However, his only official girlfriend of 9 years didn't mind him hanging out with other girls and they had a very good relationship. What surprised Renbaqian the most was that Chen Qing checked into a different room with a different girl every day, but he had never slept with his real girlfriend. According to what he said after one drink, the most delicious fruit should be plucked and tasted last. Perhaps this was the reason why Jiang Nan didn't care about what he did. She knew that the others were just passers-by and that she was the only one who married Chen Qing. She was a smart woman. Renbaqian also felt that she was a strange person. Why did you disappear a few days ago? I went to your company to look for you, but your colleagues didn't know where you went. It's hard to imagine that a person like you would suddenly disappear without a word, Chen Qing asked Renbaqian as he drank his beer. Her voice was flat, but Renbaqian could hear a hint of concern in it. He knew that if anything were to happen to him, this guy would definitely help. However, no one could do anything about the problem that he was currently facing. It's a long story. Renbaqian sighed. What a close shave. Tell me about it. Chen Qing asked. Jiang Nan was also listening attentively. Forget it, let's not talk about it anymore. It's too troublesome. Renbaqian shook his head. There was no way to explain what happened in that world. I'm telling you, there are some things that you need to hurry up. You'll only realize how much you've missed out on when you're facing death, Renbaqian said meaningfully. Chen Qing smiled and grabbed Jiang Nan's hand. After that, he said, it seems that you have really experienced some things. To actually be able to let out such a sigh. Renbaqian nodded in agreement. After the three of them had drunk for a while, Renbaqian suddenly said, recently, I've been reading a lot of farming novels about transmigrating to the Tang dynasty. If a person really transmigrates, what knowledge or specialty do you think is the most useful? Culinary skills. I guarantee that you won't starve to death and can even find a job, Chen Qing blurted out and laughed. After that, he said in a serious manner, actually, the knowledge that can be used varies depending on the place and the position you are in. But in general, the knowledge that is related to the livelihood of the people is the most useful. Simply put, it's related to eating. Regardless of whether it's farming or culinary skills, they are useful everywhere. During that era, there was no patent protection. Otherwise, improving farming tools would be a very easy way to get rich. Renbaqian agreed with these words. It was the same as what he had thought. Then what's the most useful thing to those in power? For example, to the emperor, what is useful? Renbaqian asked again. That's a lot. The emperor is the ruler of the country. Everything is useful to him. However, if we combine the question just now, there are actually two kinds of things. One of them is related to agriculture, such as increasing the production of food. The other kind is external. To put it simply, it's related to the military. For example, cement used in construction. As for the rest, it's difficult for ordinary people to achieve. Renbaqian nodded again and asked one last question, what does Wu Zetian like? This time, it wasn't Chen Qing who answered, but Jiang Nan. Her tone was gentle and didn't sound like a girl from the northeast at all. A considerate person and a strong arm. As long as you are a woman, you will want these things. It's just that because of her position, these two things that ordinary women want the most are the most difficult for her to obtain. After hearing Jiang Nan's answer, Renbocchen thought about the lady in red that he saw at that time. Immediately, he quivered. It was really hard to imagine that woman would be like a little bird in a man's arms. Most of the time, she would probably say emotionlessly, "Chop it off." Why? Are you making plans for your transmigration? Qin laughed. Renbocchen nodded with a serious look on his face, yes. After the few of them finished their meal, before they parted, Jiangnan said softly, "Our company is hiring recently. If you want to change jobs, you can consider it." Renbocchen knew that she was saving him some face. He had been missing for so long that he definitely couldn't keep his job. She definitely knew that. He laughed and said, "I want to rest for a period of time before looking for a job. If there's no suitable place, I will seek help." The most important thing now was to find out how he got to that world and how he came back. If he couldn't find the reason, how would he have the mood to work? He might not be able to come back even if he transmigrated again. For the next 2 days, Renbocchen stayed in his room. His search for the reason for his transmigration was fruitless. Since he had nothing to do, he went online to look up information on agriculture and blueprints of farming equipment. If he went back to that world again, these things should be of some use. During this period, Renbocchen received an email from Qin. After opening it, there was a long form. It was a comparison of some common knowledge with the corresponding knowledge from the Tang dynasty. There was also a long list of books. At the end of the email, there was a sentence, "If you really transmigrate, remember to bring these books." Renbocchen laughed halfway through reading. It was obviously a joke to anyone, but Qin was actually so serious. After keeping the list of books, Renbocchen prepared to buy a few books that he was interested in the next day. However, in his sleep, he woke up from the cold. While he was still in a daze, he felt that something was wrong with his surroundings. Renbocchen was still lying on a mattress, but at this moment, he felt very cold. In this season, it was good enough to be slightly cooler at night. It couldn't be cold at all. When he opened his eyes, his surroundings were pitch black. He reached out to touch the mattress and the surrounding. He couldn't feel the edge of the bed, but instead, he felt a rough and uneven stone. Is this a prison cell? Renbocchen was at a loss. After searching carefully, he found the ventilation window that was 20 centimeters tall and 1 meter wide. There was a faint light coming from outside. He had returned to this world again. Chapter 5. Renbocchen used the blanket to wrap himself up and finally felt a little warmer. However, his mind was in a mess. He had indeed transmigrated back, and this time, he brought the blanket with him. The previous time, he brought a chair and instant noodles. When he went back, he brought the straw under him, and when he came back, he brought the blanket under him. It seemed that the things he came into contact with would be brought back to this world. However, he still had no idea how he transmigrated. There were no signs, no abnormalities, and nothing strange happened the first time he transmigrated. The next 2 times, he transmigrated in his sleep. The interval between this time and the last time was 3 days. The last time he came to this world, he stayed for 3 days. It seemed that he transmigrated once every 3 days, at least for now. He just had to wait and see if he transmigrated back after 3 days. The last time he stayed here for 3 days, 9 days had passed on Earth. In that case, if he went back for 3 days, only 1 day had passed here. As Renbocchen thought about it, he crawled out of the blanket and groped in the direction of the door. Sure enough, he found a hard cornbread and a bowl of weird-smelling salt water. It seemed that no one had noticed him disappearing for a day. He threw the cornbread to the corner, poured the salt water away, and put the bowl back in its original position. Renbocchen felt a chill all over his body as he crawled back into the blanket. Just as he crawled back into the blanket, Renbochin suddenly thought of a very important question. The last time he came here, he was wearing shorts and a singlet. This time, because he was sleeping, he was only wearing underwear. If that woman summoned him. The scene was too beautiful, and he didn't dare to think about it. Also, how could he explain the blanket here? Why did a blanket appear out of thin air? This couldn't be explained either. Renbochin felt a headache when he thought about this. He had been hoping that the woman would summon him quickly, but now, he was praying that she wouldn't summon him within 3 days. He had to go back and change into his shorts and singlet. The world wasn't always as one wished. Renbochin finally believed this saying. The more you wanted something, the more it wouldn't come. When you didn't want it, it just had to come. Renbochin was awakened by the sound of the metal door being pushed open. 2 people came in. They were dressed in bright armor and had long swords at their waists, similar to the one he saw the other day. As soon as they entered the prison, they saw Renbochin wrapped in a mattress. Behind them, there was a prison guard standing at the door. When he saw the situation in the cell, his eyes widened. There was clearly only one person who came in, so where did the bedding come from? Follow us. One of the soldiers stood in front of Renbochin and looked down at him. Can I walk with this wrapped around me? Renbochin put on a big smile and was as awkward as one could imagine. Cut the crap, another soldier reprimanded, grabbed Renbochin's arm, and lifted him up. Then, she looked at Renbochin, who was only wearing underwear, and the corners of her mouth twitched. It wasn't his first time interrogating prisoners in prison, but he had never seen anyone sleeping naked. Where are my clothes? Put it on. My clothes are gone. Renbochin was at a loss for words. Both of them had seen this person when they caught him. He was clearly wearing clothes, so why was there only a piece of cloth in his crotch now? Both of them immediately looked at the jailer behind them. Being stared at by both of them, the jailer was almost scared to death. He quickly said, "It has nothing to do with us. The door behind this person's cell has never been opened. I also don't know how his clothes are gone." In order to prove what he said, he quickly said, "Even this mattress was not there when he came in. I don't know how it has appeared now." The 2 soldiers looked at each other with doubt in their eyes. It seemed that the jailer wasn't lying, and he didn't dare to do so. So what was the situation now? The jailer continued, "Look at him. Which part of him looks like he has been in prison for a few days? There is not a speck of dust on him. He looks like he just crawled out of bed. There is something wrong with this person, but it has nothing to do with us." "Take him away first," one of the soldiers said. One of the soldiers said. Then, another soldier grabbed Renbochin's arm and pushed him toward the door. "Let's go. If we are too slow, you will suffer. Can I put the mattress around me?" Renbochin was still trying his best. What awaited him was a kick on his buttocks and a pitch-black footprint. The 2 soldiers carried him and the mattress outside, and there were 2 more waiting outside. Renbochin thought to himself that he wouldn't be able to escape even if there was only 1, let alone 4. They were overestimating themselves. After leaving the courtyard, they turned a corner and arrived at the bustling street. Renbochin was escorted to the street by a few people with only his underpants on. What greeted him was gazes from all directions, followed by roars of laughter. "Look, this person came out wearing only his underpants. Did you catch him from a brothel? Sigh. Look at his bulging underpants. This guy must be in big trouble. This person is quite fair. One look and I can tell that he isn't from an ordinary family. This person guessed wrong. Most children from ordinary families on Earth were like this." Renbochin's face turned red and his head was almost squeezed between his legs. However, the 4 soldiers had no intention of letting him cover his embarrassment. They just escorted him forward. Brother, my illustrious reputation has been completely ruined. Renbochin cried miserably. After a few turns, they arrived at a relatively small palace and continued to wait in front of the door. Chapter 6. After waiting for a long time, Renbochin heard footsteps coming from afar. He secretly turned his head and saw a group of people coming from afar. At the front was a woman wearing a bright red robe embroidered with gold thread. Her hair was tied up simply. It was the woman he saw that day. She really likes red, Renbochin muttered to himself. However, looking at the palace complex, he really suspected that she was the emperor here. While Renbochin was sneaking a peek at the woman, she was also looking at him coldly. The cold glint in her eyes made Renbochin feel as if he was being pricked by needles, and he quickly lowered his head. The woman was obviously stunned when she saw Renbochin standing there in his underpants, and the coldness in her eyes intensified. The others pursed their lips and snickered, glancing at his lower body as they passed by. Renbochin's underpants were still red, and it was too eye-catching. He had specially changed into it to avoid bad luck. When everyone had entered the palace, he was also carried in by someone. As soon as he entered, he was pressed to the ground with his mattress next to him. There was a long blanket under him, and at the end of the blanket were 9 steps and a couch. What's going on? The woman reclined on the couch in front of him with one hand supporting her head. Your Majesty, he was like this when we went to get him. The jailer said that no one had been in for the past few days, and we don't know how it became like this. There's also an extra blanket. A soldier who carried him in knelt down on one knee. Oh. Come, tell me, the woman said casually as she reclined on the couch. While Renbochin was still thinking about who she was talking to, the person behind him exerted force and said, Why aren't you answering Her Majesty's question? Renbochin had been thinking about this problem ever since he came out of prison. He originally wanted to say that he had a weird habit of eating cloth after falling asleep and that he ate his clothes. However, if the other party took out a roll of cloth for him to eat, he would really have nowhere to cry. The clothes disintegrated. Renbochin lowered his head and made up a story. In order to protect the environment, most of the things produced in our country will naturally disintegrate after a period of time. I have been wearing those clothes for some time, and they naturally disintegrated after 2 days in prison. The woman frowned as she listened. She didn't understand what he meant at all. However, he still coldly said, Nonsense. Your Majesty is wise. Renbochin braced himself and said. Then how did this come about? Renbochin didn't need to look to know that she was talking about his mattress. There was no way to explain this. But even if he couldn't explain it, he still had to explain it. He threw caution to the wind and gritted his teeth. It fell from the sky. Just like what happened to me, he directly fell out. I thought someone didn't want me to freeze to death. So that's how it is, the woman said coldly. Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the other party didn't take this matter seriously. Otherwise, the only thing he could do was to bite on what he had just said and not know anything else. Drag him out and behead him, the woman said in a mocking tone. Renbochin's head immediately buzzed. Why was he chopping again? Renbochin was scared out of his wits. He used all his strength to resist the soldiers who were trying to drag him up while shouting, Your Majesty, please spare my life. I'm a talent with great potential. I know where to find grain that can produce thousands of kilograms per moo. How could his strength compare to the tall and strong soldiers on both sides? They were getting closer and closer to the door. However, even after he shouted about the grain that could produce thousands of kilograms per moo, the woman wasn't moved at all. Seeing that he was about to be dragged out of the palace, Renbochin anxiously shouted, Your Majesty, please spare my life. As long as you give me a chance, I can do anything. In order to save his life, Renbochin dared to say anything. "Oh," the woman said softly, "bring him back." Renbochin was dragged back into the palace again. He was completely drenched from head to toe. How many days had it been? Apart from being in prison, he was prepared to be chopped. He had walked several rounds of life and death situations. Renbochin felt that he was definitely the most miserable transmigrator. "You said you want a chance," the woman said coldly. "Yes, Your Majesty, please give me a chance. I can do anything." Renbochin panted heavily. He was really scared to death just now. "Then I will give you a chance. If you do well, you will live. If you don't do well, you know what will happen," the woman said coldly. Renbochin roared crazily in his heart, "I know, of course I know. I will definitely be chopped, chopped, and chopped again. Can't you change to something else?" However, on the surface, he still looked docile and said, "I will definitely do my best to handle this matter properly." "Exange," the woman called out softly. "Here." The female general that Renbochin had seen before stood in front of the stairs and knelt on one knee. "Bring him to the beast park. The new kid can't eat or sleep well. I don't know what's wrong with him. Let him take a look. If he can do it well, spare his life. If he can't do it well, behead him." "Yes." The female general acknowledged the order and stood up. She said to the two people behind Renbochin, "Bring him and follow me." On the way, Renbochin was thinking about what he said just now. Beast Park. The new kid. It seemed like they were going to see the animals. Renbochin didn't mention that he knew about the veterinary profession. "Let's go and take a look first. If we can't do it, we can delay it for 2 or 3 days. When we return, we can ask the veterinarian and bring the medicine back. There should be a solution, right?" The palace just now was located in a slightly remote location. After leaving the palace, they walked further and further away. After passing through a forest, they finally arrived at the so-called Beast Park. A supervisor immediately came forward to greet them. After asking them some questions, he brought them in. The so-called Beast Park was actually a zoo. However, the environment for the animals here was slightly better. They weren't like the cages in a zoo. Here, there were many open spaces surrounded by walls. Within the walls, there was space for all kinds of animals to move around. Only a small number of animals and birds were kept in cages. Along the way, Renbochin saw red-eyed rabbits that were as big as wolf dogs and had a mouth full of fangs. There were also creatures that looked like hippos. He also saw 2 tigers with long fangs protruding from their mouths. They looked like saber-toothed tigers, but their teeth weren't as long. Along the way, Renbochin confirmed one thing. The animals in this world were very different from those on Earth. For example, the rabbit with a mouth full of fangs looked very sinister. It pounced in the direction of Renbochin and the others and crashed into the metal cage. Renbochin wouldn't believe that it didn't bite. "We are here. This is the place." The people in front stopped. In front of them was a 1-meter-tall wall. Renbochin looked to his left and right and realized that everyone was looking at him. He took 2 steps forward and leaned against the wall to look inside. He saw that the inside was about 50 meters in diameter. The ground was about 3 meters lower than the outside. Including the wall, it was 4 meters. At the side of the wall, there was a small stream flowing through. At the end of the stream, there were iron fences. At this moment, a snow-white bear that was more than 2.5 meters in size was lying in the stream. The stream only covered half of its huge body. Chapter 7. Tell him the specific situation, the female general said to the person in charge of the beast park. "Yes." The person nodded his head and looked at Renbochin. Renbochin could clearly see the strange look in his eyes. Renbochin was already immune to this kind of look. He was more concerned about what happened to this white bear. This was related to whether his head could stay where it should be. This bear was sent by Xia Nation. Its lifespan is similar to a human's, about 50 to 60 years. It symbolizes the friendship between our country and Xia Nation. As long as this bear is here, the two countries will never fight, the person said seriously. Renbochin's mouth twitched. Could this really be a polar bear? Looking at the motionless bear lying in the water, it was highly possible. Sending a polar bear to such a hot place and not telling them how to rear it, the friendship between Xia Nation. Ha! They didn't expect this bear to live for more than a year, right? They were already prepared to fight you at any time, right? They didn't even need to find a reason. The bear that symbolized the friendship between the two countries was sent here and was killed by you in less than a year. Did you do this on purpose? Did you want to start a war? What's the situation now? Renbochin cursed in his heart. It was fine when it was sent here, but after the people from Xia Nation left, this bear didn't like to move. It lay in the water all day and only ate occasionally no matter what we fed it. It is very weak now. If there is no other way, I'm afraid it won't last long, the person in charge said worriedly. Then, his face became firm again. This is my dereliction of duty. If that happens, I am willing to die to thank your majesty for your kindness. Renbochin was speechless after hearing this. It was obvious that they were playing with you. If the bear died, you would die with it. Would the people from Xia Nation laugh at you? After hearing about the bear's behavior, he felt even hotter. In such a hot environment, even he couldn't stand it. It would be strange if the bear was willing to eat. However, just in case, he still had some questions to ask. When was this bear sent here? 1 month ago. Did they say anything when they sent the bear here? This bear is from the north of Xia Nation. It is snow white, rare and extremely precious, so we must take good care of it. China is in the north. Yes. The man had an expression that said, "Why do you even have to ask me this? Have you ever seen snow?" I understand. Renbochin, who was wearing a pair of red underpants, nodded thoughtfully. As long as you can do this well, His Majesty will not be stingy with your rewards. Otherwise. That female general called Aksayanja held onto her saber with one hand. She didn't even want to know what he understood from the start. His act of keeping him in suspense was completely wasted. No problem. Renbochin was delighted. He was finally able to keep his life. To think that he would encounter such a simple problem. The red underpants were indeed useful. I have 2 requests. Renbochin raised his finger. First, give me a set of clothes. This isn't too much, right? Aksayanja ignored him and asked directly, what's the other request? Get me some saltpeter, Renbochin said. As long as there was saltpeter to make ice, everything would be easily solved. Polar bears were resistant to the cold and afraid of heat. Giving it a piece of ice should make it feel much better. However, it would be best to seal this place and fill it with ice. Saltpeter, what's that? Renbochin fell into deep thought. What was saltpeter? This was a good question. He only remembered saltpeter, but he couldn't remember how it was made. He only remembered that saltpeter existed in ancient times and was something that could be easily obtained. Do you have ice? Renbochin changed his request. The others looked at Renbochin as if they were looking at an idiot. Even in winter, there wasn't any ice, let alone in summer. Like snow, ice was something that could only be found in Huaxia. Get me a set of clothes first. Give me 5 days and I will definitely be able to solve this problem, Renbochin said helplessly. Fortunately, he could still go back and buy some saltpeter. Saltpeter could be bought everywhere. He could also search on the internet where he could find saltpeter. Sure, I will give you 5 days. If you can't solve it, you know the consequences. I know, of course I know. 5 days is enough, Renbochin said. He will stay here for these 5 days. You guys are responsible for watching him. If anything goes wrong. Xianzhi said to the other 2 soldiers. Yes, I understand. If anything goes wrong, I will bring my head to see you. The 2 of them stood perfectly straight and said in unison. Get him a set of clothes. I will report to Her Majesty. Xianzhi instructed the 2 soldiers and left immediately without looking at Renbochin. Renbochin was afraid that something would go wrong. He stared at the white bear to see if there were any other problems. When he returned, he would search on the internet or ask a veterinarian. After all, this was a matter of life and death and he couldn't afford to be careless. Not long after, the supervisor brought an old set of clothes over. It was made of coarse cloth and chafed the skin when worn. However, it was better than wearing trousers. What's wrong with it? The supervisor asked. He wanted to hear what Renbochin had to say after he said that he would definitely be able to solve it. It's hot, Renbochin said. Hot. The supervisor was stunned. You won't be able to eat anything even if I wrapped you in a layer of fur and left you to roast under the sun, Renbochin said casually. Saber-toothed tigers also have a layer of fur. Other wild beasts also have fur. The supervisor was still a little skeptical. Is it as thick as its body? Renbochin stretched out his hand and pointed. The fur on the white bear's body was as long as a finger. At this moment, it was wet and stuck to its body. The fur on its back was dried by the sun. It rolled around in the stream to wet its body before continuing to lie on the ground. Other than that, the white bear was completely motionless and listless. Seeing this, Renbochin was almost certain that this fellow was hot. Seeing that the supervisor still wanted to ask, Renbochin waved his hand and said, Forget it. You will know in a few days. Just watch. That night, Renbochin stayed in a row of houses in the Beast Park. All the odd job workers stayed there as well. The environment wasn't considered good, but compared to the dungeon, it was like heaven and earth. For the next 2 days, Renbochin spent most of his time looking at the bear. The rest of the time, he wandered around the Beast Park and looked at the animals that were somewhat similar to those on Earth. On the 3rd night, if Renbochin didn't guess wrongly, he would be able to return to Earth tonight. Before entering the room, he said to the 2 guards who had not left his side for the past 2 days, These 2 days, I have completely thought of how to save the white bear. Don't disturb me tomorrow. I need to make some preparations. Just leave the food at the door. If there are any problems that lead to failure on the verge of success, I will drag the 2 of you down with me even if I die. After finishing his words, he entered the room and closed the door without looking at the 2 guards. The 2 guards looked at each other and stood guard at the door, one on the left and one on the right. They didn't care what the people inside wanted to do as long as they were inside. At the same time, in a certain palace, a lady dressed in red was sitting on a couch. She held a tin pot in her hand and raised her head to drink from it from time to time. How's the situation at the Beast Park? The lady suddenly thought of something and asked. That person said it would be solved in 5 days. Now, 3 days have passed. He has been wandering around for the past 3 days. I feel that he is stalling for time. The armored Xianzhi took 2 steps forward and cupped her fists. Yes, there are still 2 more days. If he can't do it. The lady paused for a moment and said, Just behead him. You don't have to tell me. After finishing her sentence, she raised her head and took another sip. Renbochin had a sleepless night. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to return to Earth. If that happened, he would be in deep trouble. After tossing and turning for an unknown period of time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly woke up with a start. He stretched out his hand and touched the lower part of his body. The bed was much softer than the one in his previous world. With the help of the light coming in from the window, he saw a familiar scene. Renbochin finally felt at ease. Chapter 8. When he reached home, Renbochin couldn't sleep anymore. He turned on his computer and started to search for information on saltpeter. In the morning, Renbochin stretched his body. Tonight, besides looking up information on saltpeter, he also looked up a lot of information on polar bears. Saltpeter was also known as potassium nitrate. When it was dissolved in water, it would absorb a lot of heat and thus could turn water into ice. There were many sources of saltpeter. Other than saltpeter mines, it could also be found in the corners of the houses in the countryside and in the fields near the pigsty. As long as this substance existed in that world, Renbochin guessed that he would be able to find it near the beast park. However, just in case, Renbochin decided to buy some to avoid not being able to find saltpeter in the future. Not only did he solve the problem of bears, but he also created ice in the middle of summer. Finally, he could prove his ability. They probably wouldn't drag him out and behead him again, right? Renbochin picked up his phone. Sure enough, it was switched off. He put it aside to charge and went back to bed to sleep. His mind was thinking about that world and the real world. He felt a little confused. 1 day in that world was equivalent to 3 days in this world. 10 years in that world was equivalent to 30 years in the real world. His lifespan was calculated based on the world he had transmigrated to and fro. Also, there was a Kirin in that world. If he took a photo and posted it on the internet, would it go viral immediately? He reckoned that they would think it was photoshopped. Thinking about all kinds of things, he didn't know when he fell asleep again. When he woke up, he looked at the time on his phone. It was 8:30 in the morning. There were a few missed calls. 2 of them were from Chin and 1 was from his former colleague. Renbochin grinned. He had been there for a year and was acquainted with everyone. He reckoned that this colleague had called him to pack up his things. To others, it seemed pretty miserable to be in such a state, but Renbochin was already used to it. After taking a bath and changing his clothes, Renbochin went to his previous company to settle his salary and collect his things. The company was located in a commercial building about half an hour's drive from where he lived. When Renbochin entered, many people saw him. However, no one spoke to him, as if they did not know him. After he walked past, they looked up and exchanged a few glances with the people beside them. He came to the manager's office and knocked on the door. When he heard someone say, "Come in," he pushed the door open and walked in. In the room was a woman in her 40s. She was wearing glasses. When she raised her head and saw that it was him, her face immediately turned cold. "You've been absent from work for no reason. You've been fired. Go to the finance department to settle the accounts, then pack up and leave." Renbochin nodded, turned around, and walked out. The woman in the room was slightly stunned. She didn't expect him to be so straightforward and not say a word. After that, he lowered his head and continued to deal with the documents. After settling everything, Renbochin stood at the entrance of the company and took a look. Then, he turned around and went downstairs. Just now, when he passed by, he took a look and saw that his seat was already occupied by another person. It seemed like a newcomer. Anyway, he didn't really want his things, so they could throw them wherever they wanted. There was no hate-provoking plot. Everyone was an adult, and no one would take the initiative to mock you. To most people, you are less than air. Air is still a necessity, and it doesn't make a difference whether you're there or not. Ranbochan mocked himself as he went downstairs. He found a chemical reagent store and bought 25 kilograms of potassium nitrate. After that, he went to the bookstore and bought a few books about animals. Finally, he went to the veterinary pharmacy to buy some vitamin B, which could treat indigestion. In addition, he saw that the bear was shedding in some places, so this medicine could help. After preparing all these things, he called Ching back. "I've been looking for you for a few days. Do you want to go out to play tonight?" Ching asked after the call was connected. Ranbochan knew what he meant by go out to play. Going to a bar to have some fun. Ching was sunny, handsome, and rich. He had always been popular with girls. It was rare for him to return empty-handed when he went to a bar to have some fun. Most of the girls who went to a bar to have some fun would go with a partner. Ranbochan's appearance was considered delicate and pretty. At least, others didn't dislike him. Moreover, he was with Ching. Most of the time, he would gain something. Ranbochan really wanted to relax. These days, he had been very nervous. Now that he could finally relax, he said, "All right, you choose the place." "All right, I have something on now. I'll hang up first. I'll text you the time and place." At night, Ranbochan waited at the place that Ching mentioned. It was a newly opened bar. A few minutes after Ranbochan arrived, Ching also arrived in his car. "You got a new car?" Ranbochan raised his eyebrows. Ching used to drive a Buick. Now, he had changed to an Audi Q7. "Recently, my dad talked to Jiangnan's dad, and he sponsored this car." Ching laughed. "Oh, you've met the parents. Congratulations." Ranbochan laughed. He was genuinely happy for Ching. "Therefore, there won't be much time to play in the future. While we still have the chance, let's have some fun." Ching hooked his arm around Ranbochan's neck, and the two of them walked into the bar. "Has the date been set?" Ranbochan asked as they walked in. "The engagement will be on October 1st, Ching replied. Congratulations." After a while, the two of them sat in the bar. Ranbochan's gaze was on the wine glass, and Ching was chatting while looking around for prey. "Those two are not bad." Ching raised his eyebrows. After a while, he said, "Unfortunately, they have male companions. When looking for fun in a bar, one must have good eyesight." Being rejected was a small matter. If things went wrong, one might even get beaten up. Ranbochan had seen such situations many times. While he was looking for prey, others were also looking for prey. Not long after, a waiter brought 2 glasses of wine over. "Sir, it's from table 57. The two of them looked in the direction that the waiter was pointing at. There were 3 women at that table. They were in their early 20s and had good looks. One of them raised her glass and gestured to the two of them. Ching also raised his glass. After the waiter left, the two of them took their glasses and moved to that table. They introduced themselves to each other. The 3 girls were all locals and were high school classmates. They were currently studying in another city. Now that it was summer vacation, they had all returned. Ching was very good at talking. Not long after, he became very friendly with the 3 of them. Ranbochan listened at the side and would occasionally interrupt to ridicule them. If nothing went wrong, they would have a good night tonight. However, something unexpected happened. While they were chatting, 2 groups of people nearby started cursing at each other. This kind of thing happened frequently, so no one paid much attention to it. However, in less than half a minute, they heard someone cursing and started fighting. There were about 5 to 6 men on both sides. After the fight, the tables and chairs were overturned. Ranbochan's table was affected as well. He wanted to move back to avoid being accidentally injured. At this moment, one of the men bumped into Renbachien and Qingqing. Seeing that he was about to crash into Renbachien, Qingqing supported him and gave him a gentle push. They are in cahoots. Beat them up. The men on the other side suddenly shouted and smashed the wine bottles at Renbachien and the others. F***ck. Renbachien didn't know what to say about such an undeserved disaster. It's a misunderstanding. We don't know them. Qingqing raised both of his hands as he retreated to show that he didn't have any ill intentions. At the same time, he wanted to explain himself. F***ck. Renbachien shouted again. This time, not only did the other party rush over, but one of them even took out a small knife from his pocket and directly stabbed it at Qingqing. Renbachien subconsciously stood in front of Qingqing and tried to grab the other party's wrist that was holding the knife. He cherished this only friend of his. However, Renbachien overestimated his speed. The other party's knife stabbed into his stomach before he could react. Renbachien held his stomach and wanted to curse, but the pain in his stomach made him unable to say a word. Murder! Murder! Someone at the side shouted. When the two groups of people saw this situation, they immediately ran away. When Renbachien woke up, he was already in the hospital with Qingqing by his side. His stomach was in pain, but he could still speak. Are you awake? Are you thirsty? Qingqing got up and asked with concern when he saw that Renbachien had woken up. How long has it been? Renbachien wanted to know how long he had slept. More than 20 hours. The main thing is that I was given anesthetics. The doctor said that it's not a big deal and that I just need to nurse my injuries. This time, it's all thanks to you. There's something wrong with those people. Renbachien thought about the scene in the bar and felt that something was wrong. The other party wasn't blind. He had already raised his hand and said that it was a misunderstanding, but they still rushed forward and stabbed him with a knife. There were also a few other people. Before he passed out, he saw them running away. If there was nothing wrong with them, why did they run away? It was obvious that these people were after Qingqing and Renbachien. Renbachien didn't usually offend anyone, so their target was obvious. It was definitely Qingqing. I have implicated you this time. I'm sorry. Fortunately, you are fine. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do, Qingqing said as he pulled Renbachien's hand. Don't make such a disgusting look. Renbachien had a look of disdain. At that time, I was hot-headed and rushed forward. If not for the alcohol, I would have run as fast as I could. Renbachien didn't want to say what he originally wanted to say. As long as Qingqing knew what was going on, it was good that he would handle this matter well. Qingqing's father's business wasn't small and he was quite influential in this city. It was impossible for him to watch his son in danger without doing anything. True feelings are revealed after drinking. Qingqing laughed. When can I be discharged? Renbachien asked. The doctor said that you have to be observed for a few more days. You don't have much to do recently, so just stay here and recuperate. No, I have to be discharged tomorrow, Renbachien said. He transmigrated once every 3 days, and it had already been 40 hours since then. I have to be discharged tomorrow during the day. Otherwise, I would be scared to death if I suddenly disappeared from the bed. Your wound is still bleeding. If you move around, it will rupture, Qingqing advised. Get me discharged during the day and use a wheelchair to push me back, Renbachien stubbornly said. All right, I will ask the doctor. Oh yes, Jiangnan came over and went back to work after seeing that you didn't wake up. She gave you flowers. Qingqing waved a bouquet of flowers at Renbachien. Chapter 9. Under Rinpoche's strong request, Chen Qing and Jiang Nan pushed Rinpoche back to the rented house in a wheelchair the next day. Potassium nitrate. What are you doing with this? After settling Rinpoche down, Chen Qing saw the potassium nitrate on the floor. Put it on my bed. Rinpoche pointed at the bag of potassium nitrate. After Chen Qing left, it would take some effort for him to bring it up. Alright, both of you can leave. Close the door. Rinpoche was a little tired. The journey back from the hospital had tormented him quite a bit. But no matter what, he had to come back. Is something the matter? Chen Qing asked suspiciously. I have been wanting to ask you for a long time. You have been missing for a few days. Now that your wounds have not healed, you insist on coming home. What is the matter? Let me see if I can help you. Jiang Nan listened attentively while tidying up the messy house. Just a small matter. You can't help me, but I can handle it. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, both of you can leave. I want to sleep for a while. You can't stay here alone. It's strenuous for you to move now. If it's inconvenient for you, we can hire a caretaker. You can stay here alone when you can move. No way. Rinpoche rejected immediately. Don't look for me for the next 10 days. Give me a call if there's anything. I will reply after I see it. Hearing Rinpoche's words, Chen Qing became even more suspicious. Recently, Rinpoche had been missing twice. Each time, he would be missing for 9 to 10 days. This time, he would be missing for another 10 days. What exactly happened to him? In any case, I am still considered your savior, right? I also saved your future husband, lest you become a widow before you even get married. Rinpoche said to the two of them. If you want to thank me, let me stay here alone. Don't worry, I will be fine. I will be alive and kicking again after 10 days. Are you sure? Yes. Seeing that Rinpoche was determined, Chen Qing looked at Rinpoche and said seriously, if there is no news from you after 10 days, I will smash your door. Don't forget what you said. Nothing must happen to you. Okay, I promise. Rinpoche nodded and smiled. I will leave food at your door these few days. He will come even if I don't come. Open the door if you're hungry, Jiang Nan said. You don't have to go through so much trouble. Now, everyone is delivering food. Are you afraid that I will starve to death? Rinpoche laughed. But Jiang Nan insisted. Rinpoche was a stubborn person, so was Chen Qing. In certain aspects, Jiang Nan was the same. Rinpoche could only nod his head and say, up to you. Actually, I have a set of martial arts passed down in my family. Within 10 days, I can enter the state of turtle breath, which can speed up the healing of wounds. If there are any other functions that can strengthen one's sex drive and nourish one's kidneys, you must teach them to me. Chen Qing held Rinpoche's hand with an affectionate look on his face. Get lost. Don't disgust me. Rinpoche pushed his claws away. In the end, the two of them ordered a lot of food to be delivered before they left. According to the doctor, the stab had perfectly avoided all the internal organs. Even the intestines were fine. Therefore, it had no effect on eating. After the two of them left, Rinpoche laboriously placed the B vitamins back on the bed. With one hand holding the bag of potassium nitrate and the other holding the B vitamins, he fell into a deep sleep. Rinpoche didn't know when he had woken up, but he was still holding on to the two bags. After touching his body, Rinpoche was sure that he had worn them again. As he laid there, Rinpoche felt waves of pain from his wound. Only then did he remember a very important problem. He only thought of bringing the potassium nitrate and the other things, but he didn't bring any painkillers. Now that the effects of the medicine had not worn off, it was already so painful. Once the effects of the medicine wore off, he was afraid that he would die. Just as Rinpoche thought, as time passed, the pain from his wound became more and more intense. He could only focus on other things and not think about his wound. It seemed that this way, the pain would be slightly alleviated. After a while, Rinpoche tried his best to sit up again. He pushed the bag of potassium nitrate to the ground. The sound of the heavy bag landing on the ground alarmed the guards outside. Originally, the two of them were worried when they heard that there was no movement in the house for a day and night. Now that they heard the sound, they were relieved. Rinpoche did not allow them to enter the house. As expected, the two of them didn't enter the house. They just guarded the door and dozed off. Rinpoche poured the potassium nitrate on the ground and changed his coarse clothes. Then, he stuffed the empty bag back under the mattress and fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. "Guards, guards," Rinpoche shouted twice. The guards outside heard him and pushed the door open. They saw Rinpoche lying on the ground with a pale face. Other than that, there was a pile of white crystals on the ground beside the bed. No one knew where they came from. "Call the person in charge here," Rinpoche said as he lay on the bed. A guard went out, and not long after, the person in charge was brought in. As soon as he came in, he asked, "Sir, do you have a way to treat that bear?" Rinpoche propped himself up and leaned his back against the wall. "I have always had a way. I can do it today. Get someone to bring a big basin and a small basin. The small basin should be as big as a wash basin. It would be best if it's an iron basin. Then, get 2 buckets of water." Rinpoche noticed that they had been using wooden basins for the past 2 days. That conducted heat too slowly, so he specially instructed them. "Okay." The person in charge swiftly carried out the task. This bear was related to his family's life, so he had to take it seriously. Not long after, a big basin and a small basin were brought in. Behind them, there were even odd job workers carrying water. "What do we do now?" "Fill the small basin with half of the water. Grab some white powder and pour it into the big basin. Then, put the small basin in as well. Finally, pour the water into the big basin." Rinpoche sat on the bed and instructed them to get busy. They didn't understand how this was related to treating the bear, but they did as he instructed. In any case, they would see the results very soon. Most importantly, they were curious about what the white powder that suddenly appeared on the ground was. After pouring the water into the big basin, they could immediately see some ice shards on the surface of the water. A few people noticed this and touched it with their hands. Immediately, they gasped in shock. The water was actually so cold. "Add some more white powder." Rinpoche instructed them to continue. Soon, the water began to freeze. After a period of time, the water in the small basin in the middle had completely turned into ice. "What is this?" When they saw such a magical scene, they were shocked. At this moment, they had already forgotten about the bear. All they could think about was what was in the basin. "It's ice. There's ice inside." Rinpoche smiled when he saw that the water in the basin had completely frozen. "So this is ice. Amazing, this is too amazing." The few of them touched here and there in amazement. They used their fingers to poke the surface of the ice and exclaimed in admiration. "This bunch of fellows have never seen ice before. They are really summer bugs." Rinpoche looked at them and thought helplessly. After a long time, when the novelty had worn off, they thought of the important matter and asked, "What now? What should we do?" "Pour out the ice and continue to make ice like this," Rinpoche instructed. It took some effort to pour out the ice from the small basin and then put the small basin back in. One of the guards held a piece of ice and said, "This divine object should be given to Her Majesty." Renbochin saw that the guard's hands were frozen red, but he still had a righteous look on his face. He couldn't help but say, "Can you at least wrap it with something? Are you going to bring it over just like that? It will melt before it reaches the place." That guard finally understood. He cupped his fists at Renbochin and said, "Thank you very much. If you don't die today, I will treat you to a drink." After that guard left with the wrapped ice, Renbochin instructed the others to continue working. After the ice in the big basin melted, they continued to add potassium nitrate. Not long after, the whole room started to turn cold. Renbochin wrapped himself in a blanket and looked at the dozens of pieces of ice. He then said, "Send the ice to the bear and place it near the water. Don't put it in the water. That fellow will like it." Chapter 10. This world was just backward, but the people here weren't stupid. The manager and the odd job workers brought all the ice over and used a wooden stick to cover a net to place the ice beside the white bear. When the third ice block was placed, the white bear crawled out of the stream, hugged an ice block, and rolled on the ground while humming non-stop. It could be seen that it was like a prostitute meeting a prostitute. The temperature was 40 degrees Celsius, and it felt comfortable from head to toe. After more than a dozen ice blocks were placed, the white bear wrapped itself in ice and hummed contentedly. "It works. It really works." The manager was overjoyed. Although it hadn't been fed yet, the white bear had changed from its half-dead appearance for the past month. "Quick, go and ask what we should do next," the manager shouted as he kicked the odd job worker beside him a few times. Renbochin looked at the odd job worker in front of him with a face full of resentment. What should he do? Feed it. The bear was finally comfortable. Why wasn't he feeding it now? With the horrible weather here, it wouldn't take long for the ice to melt. "Forget it, I'll go and take a look." Renbochin waved his hand and said, "Both of you, help me." When the guards and odd job workers helped Renbochin to the bear garden, he was sweating profusely again, and the wound on his abdomen was a little wet. If he guessed correctly, the wound was bleeding. However, this was a small problem, and the white bear was the big problem. Renbochin ignored the manager who came to greet him and leaned against the wall to look at the bear below. The white bear was happily hugging a pile of ice cubes on its left and right sides. Those ice blocks were its precious treasures. However, the ice blocks had shrunk by a third. Continue to make ice according to the method just now. Put the ice in the basin and let it melt under the sun. Dry it, and continue to make ice with the remaining white powder. Throw some fish and meat to it, Renbochin instructed. Yes. Seeing that Renbochin was able to make ice that they had never seen before with just a little powder and that the white bear was much more energetic, the few people here regarded Renbochin's words as an imperial edict and hurriedly followed his instructions. In a large hall, a woman wearing a red robe with rusty patterns on it and a golden crown on her head was playing with a sparkling and translucent piece of ice in her hand. A cool sensation spread from her fingers to her heart. Below, dozens of people in armor and robes stood on both sides and whispered to each other. Their gazes were focused on a basin-shaped ice block in the middle of the hall. Was this done by that person? The woman asked with interest. Yes, I saw him turn the water into this ice with my own eyes. The guard who was holding the ice earlier knelt on one knee. Not bad. The corner of the woman's mouth curled up. She held the ice cube in her hand and looked down. What do you think? Let me see. An extremely tall and muscular man in armor stepped forward and touched the ice. Then, he hugged the ice in his arms and said with an intoxicated expression, "It's so cold. Let me try. Let me try as well. I'm a high-ranking official, give it to me." The group of people immediately crowded around the ice cube. The man from before dashed left and right in the crowd, but he was outnumbered. In the end, he was thrown out with footprints on his butt. The woman on the throne did not care about the chaos below. She played with the ice cube in her hand for a while before it completely melted into water. "All right, stop fighting." After a long time, the woman said lazily. The people who were originally huddled together immediately separated. Only one person was hugging half of the ice cube and rubbing it on his face. As he rubbed it, he muttered, "It's so cold. It's really so cold." After a while, he reluctantly put the remaining half of the ice cube back to where it was and retreated. "Your Majesty, this person is talented, very talented. It's just that his origins are a little shady. Why don't you let me bring him back and train him properly? After confirming that there are no problems, I will send him to you." The man who started the fight shouted. "I'm the best at training people. In your hands, he will be tormented to death in 2 days." Another person quickly said. "Stop arguing. This person has some use. Let him stay in my palace." The corner of the woman's mouth twitched. She waved her hand like she was waving away flies to shut everyone up. Seeing that she had spoken, the others immediately quietened down. There were men and women in the hall, and all of them had a vigorous aura. However, they were extremely respectful of the people above them. "Bring the envoy from the Yun nation here. I heard that he has something to say to me," the woman said lazily. "Bring the envoy from the Yun nation to the palace." Someone at the door immediately shouted. Not long after, a middle-aged man with a white face and a long beard was brought in. He cupped his hands and bowed. "Envoy from the Yun nation, Guqing, greets your Majesty." "I wish your Majesty, all right, if you have something to say, say it. You have already sent me several invitations. I also want to know what you want to say." The woman interrupted him impatiently. Guqing's expression did not change, but he cursed in his heart, "Barbarian." Then, he straightened his body and said, "Your Majesty, Guqing is here for the matter of the merchants from the Zhang family and the Hong family. Your country arrested our merchants for no reason, threw them into prison, and confiscated their properties in your country." Guqing spouted a lot of things. The content was, "You have no reason or basis to arrest our kind merchants, confiscate their properties, and make our merchants panic. The Yun nation will not allow their merchants to be arrested like this. Therefore, we are here to protest. If they didn't release the captured merchants within the time limit, return the confiscated goods, and provide an explanation for this matter, the Yun nation would definitely seek justice for their subjects and people, even to the extent of meeting them on the battlefield." The woman stretched out her hand. Immediately, a maid beside her wiped her hand clean with a handkerchief. Only then did the woman ask, "How long have you been here?" "Guqing has been in your country for 3 months, Guqing replied. "Yes, drag him out and behead him," the woman said lightly. Even when 2 countries are at war, envoys are not beheaded. Moreover, Guqing is only narrating the facts and stating the pros and cons. "Your Majesty, aren't you afraid of incurring the wrath of the Yun nation by doing this?" Guqing hurriedly shouted. However, the woman had no intention of paying any attention to him. Many of the civil and military officials at the side also looked down. Some of them even grinned at Guqing, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. "Your Majesty. You are courting disaster. Your Majesty. The Emperor of Dao." Guqing shouted as he was dragged out. The people in the hall heard him screaming miserably as he left and finally stopped abruptly. "Tell the Yun nation that their ambassador has died of a sudden illness. Ask them to replace him," the woman said. "Yes. This gigolo still dares to talk about meeting us on the battlefield. Even if the Yun nation has the guts, their emperor wouldn't dare to do so," someone laughed. The Yun Nation merchants maliciously lowered the price of furs and skins, sold fake goods as genuine goods, and mixed sand into the rice they sold. The Zhang family and the Hong family are the worst. Let's teach them a lesson this time. If they still think that the people of Deo are fools, we might as well kill them all next time, someone suggested. If we kill them all, there will be no more merchants coming. Immediately, someone stood up and objected. Deo has more mountains than plains, more hunting than farming, and a lot of goods need to be brought by those merchants. We can't possibly rely on them for everything. It's best if we can do it ourselves. Do it ourselves. Do you or who? I say it's best to fight and snatch it back. All right, stop quarreling. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, please leave, the woman said as she sat up. Chapter 11. When that woman, or rather, the Empress, arrived at the Beast Park, many odd job workers were making ice bears and placing them in the bear park. Renbao saw a group of people coming over from afar. When they came closer, he took 2 steps forward and cupped his fists like those people. Greetings, Your Majesty. These actions made him grimace in pain. The Empress glanced at his abdomen. Fresh blood had seeped through the gauze and stained his coarse clothes. What's going on? The Empress asked coldly. We don't know either. He stayed in the room for a day and became like this. The 2 guards hurriedly knelt on one knee and answered. It was indeed caused by me. It has nothing to do with the 2 of them, Renbao explained. Let me take a look at your wound. The Empress was unmoved. He only needed to look at the wound to know what had happened. Renbao grimaced in pain as he pulled up his shirt, revealing the gauze underneath. Seeing that the other party was still staring at him, he removed the gauze. The wound was not big and was very smooth, about the width of 2 fingers. It didn't seem like the guards did it. If it was done by a guard, the wound should be much bigger than this. With one look, the Empress could see the stitches on the wound. Did you sew it yourself? The Empress asked. Yes. He braced himself and answered. Your skills are not bad. The method was not bad either. When we get back, let the army popularize it. This is how wounds are treated. The Empress's last sentence was an instruction to the person beside her. Then, he continued forward, 5 days have passed. I'm here to see how that little fellow is doing. I want to see if you can still keep your head. Yes. Renbao's head was still lowered. He gasped in pain as he followed behind the Empress. However, he was very careful to maintain a distance of a few steps. The group came to the side of the wall and looked down. The bear was still rolling around in a pile of ice, looking very happy. All of a sudden, the Empress leaped down and her red dress fluttered in the air. Renbao looked up and quickly lowered his head. The Empress's leap was at least 3 meters high, and it really gave Renbao a fright. But what scared him even more was that when he raised his head, he saw 2 long legs under the skirt. He was really afraid that he would be killed because he saw something he shouldn't have. God knows what the customs of this world are like. If he wanted to see a pair of long legs, he could go home and watch it on his computer and television. If he was beheaded because of this, it would be a great injustice. He glanced at his surroundings out of the corner of his eyes. Seeing that no one else had any strange reactions, he felt relieved. He looked into the bear garden and saw that the Empress had already landed and was walking toward the white bear. Is it all right for Her Majesty to go over? Renbao asked softly. He didn't know what the martial arts in this world were like, but seeing that the people around him weren't worried, he guessed that the Empress was probably very strong. Her Majesty is one of the strongest people in Deo. How could a mere animal hurt Her Majesty? Xiange raised her head and said. She seemed to be somewhat dissatisfied that Renbochin doubted the Empress. Oh, Renbochin replied obediently and didn't say anything else. His gaze was completely focused on the Empress below. One of the strongest experts in Deo. How strong was he? The Empress walked to the side of the white bear. The white bear seemed to have sensed that someone was invading its territory. It roared, threw the ice to the side, and pounced on the Empress. Its huge body weighed a few hundred kilograms. When it pounced on the white bear, it brought with it a huge oppressive force, causing Renbochin's heart to tighten. Renbochin estimated that the Empress was 1.7 meters tall, but in front of the white bear, she seemed extremely petite. It was as if she could be smashed into pieces with a single slap. Facing the pouncing bear, the Empress didn't retreat at all. She stretched out her jade-white hand and gave it a slap. Suwon saw with his own eyes that the slap drew an arc, bypassed the front paw of the huge bear, and landed on the face of the roaring bear. The bear's howl immediately turned into a blood-curdling screech. It spun in the air before falling to the ground. The Empress went forward and grabbed the bear's fur. She lifted it up by half. Seeing that the bear still dared to bare its teeth, she gave it another slap with her left hand. After 2 slaps, the white bear was immediately silenced. Not to mention the bear, even Renbochin felt his heart ache when he saw this. How much strength was needed to slap a bear that weighed a few hundred kilograms in the air? It was simply terrifying. The most terrifying thing was that it was obvious that the Empress didn't use her full strength. It was just a simple slap, followed by another slap, and it was enough to cause the white bear, which was suspected to be a polar bear, to lie on the ground and tremble. Seeing that the white bear lay there motionless, the Empress turned around and walked to the perimeter wall. She didn't seem to use much strength, but her body rose from the ground and landed on the perimeter wall. Then, she took a small step forward and jumped down. "Your Majesty is mighty." Renbochin hurriedly lowered his head and cupped his hands. He wanted to say a few more words, but he had never flattered anyone since he was young. For a moment, he couldn't find the words to say and could only say, "Mighty." "It's all right, it's more spirited now. At least it can bare its teeth now," the Empress said faintly. Renbochin grinned. The price of baring its teeth was too heavy. He didn't know how many teeth that bear would have left. However, the good news was that the Empress approved of the white bear's condition, and his life was saved. "All right, now tell me what's going on with this ice. How did you do it?" "It's saltpeter. When saltpeter dissolves in water, it will absorb heat. With enough saltpeter, the water temperature can be lowered to a certain extent and freeze," Renbochin said. It was unknown if the Empress understood what he said, but she said, "Seeing that you have some ability, you can be an odd job supervisor here and be in charge of making ice for me. In addition, look after this bear well." "Yes." Renbochin nodded and replied. "Caretaker, sure, arrange some helpers for him." After the Empress finished her instructions, the caretaker of the beast park immediately nodded and complied. In addition, reward him with 100 taels of silver and a box of black mud cream. Xange, go to the medicine storehouse and get a box of black mud cream for him, the Empress continued to instruct. "Yes, Your Majesty." When Renbochin heard the Empress's words, the last stone in his heart was lifted. 100 taels of silver. 1 tael was 50 grams, and 100 taels was 50,000 grams. 1 gram should be around $3 to $4, right? With 150 to 200,000 taels of silver, he finally had some spare cash. Even though it wasn't enough to buy a house, his already stretched wallet could finally be filled up a little. In the short term, he didn't need to consider the problem of finding a job. Now that he had been gone for 3 days and missing for 9 days, he couldn't do anything. "Oh yes, what did you say that you knew how to do the other day?" The Empress suddenly remembered something. Your Majesty, I will definitely do my best to fulfill your orders. I have read a lot of books. Whether it is farming or smelting, whether it is food or commerce, I know a thing or two about them. Well, stay here for now. In the future, I will give you something to do. Once you are done, I will reward you, the Empress said and left with everyone. After the Empress left, Caretaker Sure smiled and asked, "How should I address you?" In the future, you and I will be here, so we should familiarize ourselves with each other. Caretaker Sure. I am Renbotchen. Renbotchen cupped his fists politely. Caretaker Sure's smile seemed to be sincerely congratulating him, but he didn't know if he was thinking the same way. It was better not to blame him for stealing the limelight and snatching away his authority. As for saving Caretaker Sure's life, Renbotchen didn't even dare to think about it. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water, but a life-saving grace could not be repaid, so he could only take your life. Since ancient times, there were many people like this. Don't be so polite. Let's go, I will arrange a few helpers for you. Then, let's go for a drink. Caretaker Sure pulled Renbotchen enthusiastically. I am injured. Renbotchen smiled bitterly. Chapter 12. Renbotchen felt that Caretaker Sure was exaggerating when he told him to apply the ointment. This injury would take at least 10 to 20 days to heal, right? The black mud cream was stored in a wooden box. Inside the box was a sticky black substance with a pungent smell. Renbotchen wondered if this was really black mud. However, the wound on his abdomen was really painful. Renbotchen gritted his teeth and picked out some of the ointment to apply on his abdomen. Just as he applied the ointment, his abdomen felt cool to the touch. Soon after, it turned into a burning sensation. Finally, it turned into an intense itch. It made him want to scratch his abdomen, but he forced himself not to touch the wound. Could it be that I took the wrong ointment? Or has it expired? Renbotchen looked as if he was suffering from constipation. If this was torture, Renbotchen reckoned that he would have confessed. After enduring for an unknown period of time, the pain and itch on his abdomen started to subside. After a while, it turned into a warm and comfortable feeling. This ointment is really deadly. Renbotchen used his sleeve to wipe his face. It was full of sweat. He rubbed his abdomen. There was still a slight pain, but it was no longer a problem. Although it's deadly, it's really useful. After Renbotchen sighed, his attention was attracted by the 10 silver ingots placed at the side. His job was gone, and he only had a few thousand yuan in his savings. It would only take a few months for him to run out of money. These 10 silver ingots allowed him to make a small fortune. I wonder if I can get out of here. If I use these silver ingots to buy things here and sell them, will I be able to earn more? Renbotchen rubbed his chin and thought. He did not know what things in this world could be sold at a high price on earth. However, it seemed that he did not need to worry about this. As long as he hugged on to the Empress and obtained some things from earth, wouldn't it be easy to get some gold and silver? Thinking of this, Renbotchen felt that his future was bright. Renbotchen came from an ordinary family. It was like this when he was in school. His family was neither poor nor rich. His studies were average and his character was average. Therefore, he had been ordinary since young and did not attract any attention. Initially, he thought that he would live an ordinary life like this. However, now, he felt that his good luck was about to arrive. Just as Renbotchen was snickering, Caretaker Sure barged in from outside and pulled Renbotchen out. I have arranged 10 people for you. Take a look, and if anyone is disobedient, you can tell me. Let's go have a drink after that. My injuries haven't healed yet, Renbotchen cried out. What kind of person would drink alcohol after getting a hole in his stomach? Did he not want to live anymore? Wasn't the black mud cream delivered? Caretaker Sher was stunned. I have applied it, but it will take some time before the wound heals, Renbochin replied. It's good that you applied it. Caretaker Sher let go of Renbochin's hand and pulled his shirt. Hey, why are you still wearing this? As she spoke, she tore off the gauze that was wrapped around Renbochin's stomach. Look, aren't you fine now? Caretaker Sher patted Renbochin's wound and smiled. Renbochin subconsciously dodged, but he immediately looked down and was dumbfounded. His wound, which was still bleeding, was now completely healed. It was just that the location of the wound was all tender flesh, which was different from other parts of the body. Also, the few lines looked a little ugly. But it had indeed grown back. Renbochin swallowed his saliva and quickly rushed back to open the wooden box to take a look. He had only used about 1/5 of it just now. The name wasn't very nice, but the medicinal effect was really amazing. A wound that would have healed in 10 to 20 days actually healed in such a short period of time. If he brought this back, it would be priceless. You have to keep this medicine well, it's indeed quite expensive. Caretaker Sher looked at Renbochin and laughed. Can I buy it? How much is it? Renbochin originally thought that this medicine would be extremely expensive, but according to Caretaker Sher, it was only expensive, but not rare. The silver that I rewarded you should be enough to buy a box. A box of 100 taels of silver was equivalent to 20,000 taels of silver. It was indeed not cheap to buy such a box of medicine. However, based on the medicinal effect of this medicine, it was really too cheap. Come, let's go out and take a look at the people I have chosen for you. Caretaker Sher watched Renbochin place the wooden box on the bed and pulled him out. There were 10 people waiting outside. They stood loosely, but all of them were burly men with arms that could run horses. If he didn't know that they were odd job workers, Renbochin would have thought that they were soldiers. He had to admit that the people he saw after coming to this world were all tall and strong. The men were generally more than 1.75 meters tall, and the tallest were 1.9 meters tall. The women were also about 1.65 meters tall. Renbochin didn't know how they could grow so tall in a feudal society. If he didn't remember wrongly, the average male in the Tang dynasty was about 1.6 meters tall. Only the aristocratic families were taller. The 10 people present were young and old. They all looked at Renbochin curiously. They heard that this person could make ice. It was bone-chilling, but it was indeed a good thing to cool off in summer. It was really magical. It was just that this caretaker's body was too frail. It looked like he would be blown away by the wind. Brothers, we will all be in the same boat in the future. I will rely on everyone's help for the things that my superiors have instructed me to do. I will not mistreat everyone. However, if anyone makes a mistake, I won't be merciful. Renbochin cupped his hands and said to everyone, "We will do whatever the caretaker says." The 10 people loudly agreed. That's good. As long as you do your job well, I will definitely not mistreat everyone. That's all for now. Renbochin was very satisfied with their attitude. What he was most afraid of was each of them harboring their own thoughts and not putting in the effort. If that happened, he would have a headache. The task that Her Majesty instructed us to do is to make ice. We definitely can't leave the ice outside as it will melt in no time. First, we have to make a cellar to store the ice. I wonder if there is a suitable place here. The second half of his sentence was directed at Caretaker Sher. He wasn't in the mood to drink if he didn't clarify the situation. Caretaker Sher thought for a while and said, "There is one. Sometimes, it is used to store some grass. I'm not sure if it will work. It's good that there is one. Let's go take a look first," Renbochin immediately said. The cellar wasn't far from where everyone was. In a short while, they arrived there. Occasionally, a few withered grass could be seen on the ground around the cellar. Caretaker Sure opened the lid and said, "It's here." Renbochin wanted to go down. Suddenly, he thought of something. How long has it been unused? If it had been unused for too long, there might be a lack of oxygen inside. He would be unlucky if he went down. A few months. Throw a torch down to take a look. Within a few minutes, someone threw a torch down. Renbochin looked down at the fire burning brightly. He was finally relieved and climbed down along the edge of the cellar. Renbochin picked up the torch and walked around the cellar. It was empty except for some withered grass on the ground. There were also some wooden pillars supporting the cellar to prevent it from collapsing. The cellar wasn't small. It was about 100 square meters in size and 2.5 meters in height. There was a layer of soil that was about 1.5 meters above it. It felt much cooler when he came down. This is it. Renbochin went up and made his decision. Caretaker Sure, let's borrow this place to make an ice cellar, Renbochin said to Caretaker Sure. No problem. In the future, I can come here to cool off if I have nothing to do, Caretaker Sure agreed readily. Clean up this place first before we can store ice, Renbochin said to the 10 odd job workers. All right. Everyone shouted and went to get their tools. Chapter 13. I bought this from Zhangjiadian, and I can't bear to drink it. When they reached Caretaker Sure's room, he took a gourd from the wall, patted it, and smiled at Renbochin. You saved that bear, which means you saved me. I'll give you half of this good stuff, Caretaker Sure said straightforwardly. Caretaker Sure was the caretaker here, and Renbochin reckoned that he earned quite a lot. Since he couldn't bear to drink this wine, it should be pretty good. However, he was immediately disappointed when he poured the wine out. The wine was turbid and had a weird taste. Don't be fooled by its color. This is a special liquor from the Yun nation. It feels like it's on fire after one sip. Renbochin was even less interested after hearing what he said. He could get spirits ranging from 40% to 70%, and anything higher would be alcohol. Sure enough, he couldn't expect too much from the wine in this world. He clinked his glass with Caretaker Sure's and took a sip. Renbochin frowned. He had never drunk such a disgusting wine in his life. Even the loose liquor that cost 2 to 3 yuan per caddy was much better than this. Brother Ren, have you never drunk this wine before? The men of Dao love this kind of liquor the most. It's very flavorful. Upon hearing Caretaker Sure's praise, Renbochin curiously asked, how much is this wine? 1 caddy is 2 taels of silver. Caretaker Sure gestured with his fingers and said, if I wasn't addicted to this wine, I wouldn't have bought it. 1 caddy costs me a month's salary. Renbochin was speechless. 6 taels of silver was equivalent to 300 grams, which was about 1,000 yuan. He could only buy 1 caddy of this inferior wine. What a huge profit. Furthermore, this wine was so disgusting. If he went back to sell some erguotu, wouldn't they go crazy over it? He would make a crazy amount of money then. He decided to keep this matter at the bottom of his heart and plan for the future. Renbochin and Caretaker Sure drank and chatted. They asked a lot about this world. There were 4 main countries here, the Great Xia Empire, the Yun nation, the Qin nation, and the Dao nation. The country that Renbochin was in was the Dao nation. It was originally called the Nine Mist Nation and was founded less than 70 years ago. It was a country that was built by a group of aborigines. Caretaker Sure did not know the exact size of Dao nation. He did not know either, but the population of Dao nation was around 30 million. There were many mountains and forests in the country and few plains. Most of the commoners hunted in the mountains for a living, and at least half of them still lived in the forest, living with wild beasts every day. They were poor, but it was also because of this that the Dao nation was brave and good at fighting. To the north of the Dao nation was the Great Xia Empire, which was said to be 3 times bigger than the Dao nation. In the east was the Yun nation, and in the southeast was the Qin nation. It was said that there were other countries in the west of Great Xia and the south of the Qin nation. Dao nation was rich in furs, gems, gold, and silver. As for other things, they were lacking. Daily necessities, salt, beautiful clothes, and silk fabrics were almost all imported. Even the annual shortage of grain was not small, and they had to import it. Therefore, a large number of merchants from other countries came here to make money. Most of them were from the Yun nation. The Zhangjiadian that caretaker sure bought wine from belonged to the Yun nation's Zhang family. Those black-hearted thieves. Speaking of those merchants, old Zhang even spat on the ground. Sooner or later, we will fight our way to their imperial city. Those merchants would always buy furs and gems at a low price, and then sell all kinds of inferior products at a high price. Almost every year, there would be conflicts because of these matters. The wine that caretaker sure drank was said to be much better than this wine in the Yun nation, but they only sold this kind of wine to Dao. As for Dao, they didn't even have enough to eat, let alone make wine. Although the people occasionally made some wine, the taste was even worse, and it was as plain water. The other things were similar, and they were sold to Dao of inferior quality. The Dao nation had been dissatisfied with this for a long time. 20 years ago, this incident was the cause of their dissatisfaction, and Dao almost fought their way to the Yun nation's imperial city. Afterward, the Qin nation sent troops to help the Yun nation, and with the mediation of the Great Xia Empire, Dao's army finally withdrew with a full harvest. After that, the merchants from other countries became more well-behaved. Although it was still very infuriating, it was no longer as excessive as before. However, as time passed, the merchants forgot the pain and began to become more aggressive. Now, caretaker Shi's biggest wish was that when the Empress gave the order to start a war again, he would be the first to put on his helmet and armor and climb the walls. When Renbaqian heard this, he had an idea. To put it bluntly, the only advantage of Dao was that they could fight. The disadvantage was that they had no other advantages other than being able to fight. Starting from the Empress, everyone was one-track minded. Other than fighting and killing, there seemed to be nothing else in their minds. They had to buy all kinds of daily necessities from other merchants. In view of Dao's bad temper, the other countries didn't want to force Dao into a corner. They would sell you things, but they would only sell you the worst. The good ones would be sold to their own countries. As for the technology, they could forget about it. After listening to caretaker Shi, Renbaqian laughed mischievously. The Dao nation lacked everything. It just so happened that he knew everything. Even if he didn't, he could still go back and learn. With the knowledge of the entire world as his backing, if he couldn't make a name for himself in this world, his life would be in vain. It was best for him to go back and learn the technology before coming back to make something that he wanted. He couldn't possibly go back and buy potassium nitrate and bring it back. It was fine to do it once or twice, but it would definitely be troublesome if he did it more than once. Furthermore, for a large-scale product like wine, it was even worse. It was already fortunate that the Empress didn't pursue the issue with the clothes and mattress. As for the situation with the Kirin that pulled the carriage and whether there were experts who could move mountains and drain the seas, caretaker Shi wasn't sure. However, according to him, there were experts in this world. It was a little exaggerated to destroy a city with one blow, but it was still possible to destroy a city gate with one blow. However, to Renbaqian, destroying a city gate with one blow was already exaggerated enough. If he could learn it, he would be able to do whatever he wanted when he returned to Earth. Caretaker Shi didn't seem to drink strong alcohol. He collapsed after drinking less than half a liter of wine. After he collapsed, Renbaqian was only half drunk. He sat there thinking and laughed from time to time. Deo lacked food. It wasn't possible to make wine now. Deo didn't have many plains and forests, so it didn't produce enough food. Earth happened to have crops that could produce thousands of caddies per moo. It tasted pretty good and could completely solve Deo's food shortage situation. Furthermore, it could be used to make wine. In addition, he could think of ways to get salt. He could go back and do some research to see if he could get salt from the mountains. As for toothbrushes and soap, it was even easier. As long as there was a suitable opportunity, he could make them. There was also cotton. He could get everything out by himself. When he thought of this, Renbochin was elated. It was great to come to such a world in the country. In this world, it was really too easy to earn money. Similarly, there were some unique things in this world, such as the black mud cream. It could also allow him to not worry about money on Earth. When he thought of this, Renbochin became even more excited. After thinking about it for a while, he saw that Caretakershire had already slipped under the table. However, he had to take things one bite at a time and walk one step at a time. It was better to establish a foothold in this world first. When Renbochin thought of this, he got up and went to check on the progress of the cellar cleaning. When he reached the place, a group of people were washing the cellar with water. Chapter 14. On the first day, they cleaned the cellar, and on the second day, they made ice and stored it. Renbochin even brought a few people around the beast park. There were traces of saltpeter in many corners of the walls, especially beside the rooms where the odd job workers lived. There was a layer of white saltpeter at the corner of the walls. He arranged for people to collect all the saltpeter and divide it into several batches to make ice. The used ice water would evaporate the water and leave behind the white saltpeter for further use. Out of the 10 people, 6 of them collected water to make ice, 2 threw the ice into the cellar, and the other 2 caught it and placed it neatly. As the amount of ice in the cellar increased, the temperature of the cellar plummeted. Towards the end, the hands of the 2 people below were red and swollen from the cold, and their bodies were shivering. Looking at this scene, Renbochin really wanted to ask if they were stupid. Wearing a sleeveless vest to work in an ice cellar. Even if they had never seen ice before, they should at least wear 2 more layers of clothing when they knew it was cold. In the end, after asking, these odd job workers only had this kind of clothing. In fact, even during the coldest time, it wasn't that cold. Renbochin had no choice but to let them take turns. Furthermore, he tied 2 sheets around their bodies to keep them warm. Especially their hands, they would definitely get frostbite if they kept doing this. He tore 2 more pieces of cloth and let them wrap it around their hands to keep them warm. As for the 2 injured ones, he asked them to go to the kitchen and find some snake oil to apply on their hands. In Deo, there was plenty of snake oil. At night, after Renbochin had arranged everything for the 3rd day, he hugged the 100 taels of silver and black mud cream and laid on the bed. He couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. 100 taels of silver. As long as he could find a place to sell it, he would soon have the largest sum of money in his life. After lying on the bed for an unknown period of time, Renbochin felt his surroundings spinning and the room had completely changed. He was back on Earth again. He touched the things in his hands. The black mud cream and silver ingots were still there. He estimated that he would soon have a large sum of money. Renbochin smiled again. Renbochin rolled on the bed for a while before falling asleep. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, Renbochin was awakened by a series of knocks on the door. After putting the silver and black mud cream away, Renbochin opened the door in his underpants and vest. He saw a worried Chen-Ching outside the door. Upon seeing Renbochin, Chen-Ching punched Renbochin in the chest and said, "You finally opened the door. I was so worried these few days that I wanted to smash the door open a few times." Renbochin stepped aside to let Qing in. With a sweep of his eyes, he saw the incubator on the ground. When he opened it, he realized that it was filled with food. However, it was already cold. A warm feeling welled up in his heart. "I'm fine, aren't I?" Renbochin laughed. Qing sized him up and saw that his complexion was indeed rosy and much better than 10 days ago. He finally felt a little relieved. Even though he still had some doubts, Qing knew that everyone had their own secrets. If Renbochin didn't want to talk about it, he couldn't get to the bottom of it. "How's the wound? Do we need to go to the hospital for a checkup?" Qing asked. Renbochin pulled up his singlet to reveal the wound. "It's completely healed. Your recovery ability is really fast." Qing laughed. "It's good that you're out. My dad will treat you to dinner tonight to thank you." "All right." Renbochin laughed as well. He had an idea regarding the black mud cream. However, it required a lot of money and Qing couldn't afford it. He still needed his dad's approval. Qing's dad had always had a good reputation in this city. Looking for him was much more reliable than looking for someone else. "There's one more thing that I have to tell you. The person who stabbed you previously has been caught. However, we can't touch the person behind it for the time being." Qing hesitated for a while and said to Renbochin. Renbochin nodded his head to indicate that he understood. "However, don't worry. As long as there's a chance, I will definitely settle this score." Qing was stunned for a while. Seeing that Renbochin was fine, he went back to work. Renbochin wanted to go back to sleep, but he couldn't fall asleep after tossing and turning in bed for a long time. He might as well get up and have his meal. After that, he went to buy a spray gun. He couldn't possibly take out those 10 ingots just like that, right? It would be best if he melted them into silver ingots before selling them. That way, he wouldn't get into trouble easily. After walking around outside for a long time, Renbochin carried a spray gun, gasoline, and a small saw. He first cut the ingots in the middle and used the spray gun to melt them. He didn't need to melt them completely. As long as the surface was melted and the original shape couldn't be seen, it would be fine. After working for an entire afternoon, half of the ingots were melted. Renbochin received a call from Qing, changed his clothes, took the black mud cream, and headed to the restaurant. At the entrance, he saw Qing waiting for him. "Why did you bring a gift?" Qing saw that Renbochin was still holding something in his hand and immediately slapped his shoulder. "Shouldn't I be the one giving the gift?" "It's indeed a gift, but it's different from what you think," Renbochin said mysteriously. The two of them went to the private room and chatted for a while. Jiangnan arrived first, followed by Qing's parents. When Qing's parents entered the private room, they held on to Renbochin's hands and thanked him profusely. After all, in that kind of situation, how many people would sacrifice themselves for their friends? Regardless of whether Renbochin was rich or not, Qing's parents were extremely satisfied with this friend of Qing's. At this moment, Renbochin was even more pleasing to the eye. During the banquet, they kept asking about Renbochin's situation. When they found out that Renbochin had just left his job, they even had the intention to let Renbochin work at the Qin family's company. Renbochin rejected them tactfully at first, then he smiled and said, "Even though I'm friends with Qing, I still have a business proposal that I would like to discuss with you guys. Uncle, you can also give me some suggestions." Upon hearing Renbochin's words, Qing was a little surprised. Papa Qin did not know what Renbochin wanted to say. He had a rough understanding of Renbochin's situation, and from his point of view, Renbochin did not have the capital to discuss business with him. However, since Renbochin was Qing's friend, there was no harm in listening. If he was really interested, there was no harm in investing some money. It could be considered as a repayment for the favor this time. If he wasn't interested, he could also give some suggestions. Papa-chan felt that he had good foresight. Please speak, Papa-chan said seriously. Renbochan opened the wooden box and revealed the black mud cream inside. Everyone's gaze was attracted to it. What's this? Black mud cream. I obtained it by chance in the past and have never used it before. I only thought of it after I got injured. What's its use? It stops bleeding and accelerates the healing of wounds, Renbochan introduced. What's the effect? Papa-chan raised his eyebrows. To be honest, he wasn't really interested. His own business had nothing to do with medicine. It wasn't appropriate for him to enter a field that he had never stepped into. The most important thing is the effect. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken it out, Renbochan said in high spirits. In that world, this thing was expensive, but it wasn't considered rare. However, on Earth, it wasn't just a matter of price. Normally, after a surgery, it would take a few days or even more than 10 days before the patient could walk and recover. The long recovery period would also cause the patient to be unable to work for a long period of time. Not to mention the possibility of infection during this period. However, this black mud cream could heal the wound in a short period of time, completely avoiding the patient's pain and long periods of recuperation. Renbochan took out a fruit knife that he had prepared earlier from his pocket. Under everyone's astonished gaze, he ruthlessly slashed his arm. Fresh blood flowed down like a fountain. Renbochan, what are you doing? Chin-Ching was shocked. Papa-chan and Mama-chan didn't look too good either. Hurting yourself at the dining table. What do you mean? Ouch! Renbochan took a deep breath due to the pain. Following which, he waved his hand and said, "Don't be anxious, I know what I'm doing." Renbochan showed them his wound and said, "All of you have seen the wound." Following which, he used a tissue to wipe the blood off and used his finger to pick up a piece of black mud cream to cover the wound. After he was done, Renbochan smiled at them and said, "Don't be anxious, the moment of miracle is coming." Following which, he felt his arm turn from cool to hot and finally numb and itchy, causing him to break out in cold sweat. After a long time, those feelings finally subsided and Renbochan heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, the black mud cream on his arm had already become a black scab. After tearing off the scab, Renbochan took a look. Indeed, the wound had already grown tender flesh. Alright, the moment of miracle is coming. Renbochan smiled. After wiping off the remaining blood stains on his arm with a wet tissue, he showed his wound to everyone. Chin-Ching immediately stood up from his chair and came over to look at Renbochan's wound. He exclaimed, "This is simply godly." Papa-chan was initially a little impatient, but he didn't leave just because of his son. At this moment, when he saw Renbochan's wound, he was immediately shocked. The few of them touched Renbochan's arm and to their surprise, the wound had already healed. Half an hour ago, there was a 10-centimeter long wound and blood was flowing all over the floor. Chapter 15. The few of them returned to their original positions. Father Chen had a serious look on his face. Now, the people in front of him were not just his son's friends, but also business partners. How do you want to cooperate? I'll provide the goods, and you guys will provide the funds for a joint venture. We'll do research first, analyze the ingredients, and look for substitutes. After that, we'll build a factory to produce it, Renbochan said with a serious look on his face. Do you have the formula? Papa-chan asked again. I don't have it on hand right now, but I can get it. A pharmacy and some raw materials. However, due to the scarcity of materials, they had to conduct research and use other materials as substitutes. Even if the medicinal effect was slightly inferior, it was still acceptable. After all, there was absolutely no ointment on the market that could match the effect of this ointment. Not even 1/10 of the ointment's effect could be achieved. As long as we can achieve half of the effect, it will be sufficient, Renbochin said. Of course, he didn't have the prescription, but he believed that he could get it. He had so many things on hand that he could trade with the other party. Such as winemaking, such as others. Even in terms of prescriptions, there were some modern technologies that the other party didn't have, right? For example, anti-inflammatory drugs like penicillin. Anesthetic. There had to be something that could move the other party. Moreover, it was easy to produce and its market was even bigger than the black mud cream. After all, the black mud cream was expensive and the production would not be high. When Renbochin said that he could get the formula and the ingredients, Papa Chin was relieved. Now that the finished product was here, as long as there were no problems with the ointment and materials, it was completely possible to carry out research and replace the original materials. As long as he could do it, he didn't need to worry about opening up the market. The effects of this medicine could shut up all the voices of doubt. Furthermore, he also remembered that the military was the biggest customer of this drug. With this medicine, there were too many places he could build a good relationship with. What about the side effects? Papa Chin asked again. Well, as far as I know, during the period of the drug's effect, due to the rapid healing of the wound, there will be a strong itch and pain. As for the rest, they are our research targets. Papa Chin looked at Renbochin with admiration. Renbochin's speech was well organized and not messed up at all. It seemed like he had thought of everything beforehand. He was indeed a good kid. Papa Chin pondered for a while, his fingers lightly tapping on the table. This was a subconscious action when he was thinking about important issues. After a while, he said, "You have a product, but no money. I have money, but no products." It looked like a good partnership. However, there were many things involved, such as setting up a laboratory, hiring staff, building a factory, and so on. Therefore, in terms of the cooperation ratio, we can't take too low. Of course, there were many rich people. But you're the only one who took out this ointment. Therefore, I think a 40-60 split is a suitable ratio. I'll take 4 and you take 6. Renbochin stared blankly for a moment. He didn't expect Papa Chin to offer such favorable terms. One had to know that his expectation was 50-50, and even 60-40ths was acceptable. It was just that he had 40% and the other party had 60%. The moment the other party opened his mouth, it was even better than what he had expected. He even said that there were many rich people and that he was the only one who could afford the ointment. This was completely open and honest. What he should have said during the negotiation had been said by the other party. Papa Chin looked at Renbochin's expression and laughed. Business is business. However, there were many ways to earn money, and I didn't need to break my own principles for these things. In business, a win-win situation was the most important. Also, I don't care about the money in this business, but the influence that this medicine will bring after it hits the market. At the same time, you saved Sure too, which is also a favor to me. However, I have a request. Of the 60% you'll take, 20% will only be the right to receive dividends. Renbochin nodded his head to show that he understood. Papa Chin was afraid that he would interfere after he had the advantage in the shares. If 20% of the shares were only the right to receive dividends, then his and Papa Chin's authority would be 50-50. However, he also said, "Uncle, you don't have to worry about this. I don't want to interfere too much in this matter. I don't know what to do next, and I don't want to do these things. My mind is on other things. Therefore, I'll just put my name on it." At this point, both parties didn't have any more opinions. Finally, Papa Chin said, "In that case, this matter is settled. We'll sign a contract tomorrow. You must get the formula and the ingredients. This must be clearly stated in the contract. In addition, you should need money now. I can pay you 2 million yuan in advance and deduct it from the dividends in the future. Ren Baqian listened to Papa Chen's words. Papa Chen had even thought of money for him. What else could he say? This meal was considered a joyous one for both the host and the guest. Both parties left in satisfaction. Papa Chen and Mama Chen sat in the back seat while Chen Qing drove. How do you feel? Papa Chen suddenly asked. Pretty good. Chen Qing said with a relaxed expression. Since young, he didn't lack money and didn't have much of a concept of money. In any case, from his point of view, both his family and Ren Baqian didn't suffer any losses in this business deal. That was pretty good. I'll do this first, lest both of you don't have enough experience and can't do the job well. Furthermore, it might affect our relationship. When everything is stable, I'll hand it over to you. Forget it, I'm very satisfied with my current job. Chen Qing laughed. If your salary is enough for your daily expenses, I'll be satisfied too. Papa Chen chuckled. Chen Qing also laughed awkwardly. When Ren Baqian reached home, he jumped up and cheered. The harvest this time was much bigger than what he had expected. Moreover, the 2 million yuan in advance was a huge sum of money to him. With this 2 million yuan, he really didn't need to worry about anything. He could buy a car and a house directly. He didn't need to stay in this small rented apartment anymore. When this medicine was developed and could be marketed, he could even lie down and count his money. However, there was a prerequisite for all of this. He had to get the formula and the ingredients. Looking at the lumps of silver in the bathroom, Ren Baqian swept them aside. Since the 2 million yuan was going to be in his account soon, there was no need to burn silver anymore. He would bring it back to Deo to see if there was anything worth buying. The night passed. The next day, Ren Baqian received a call and rushed to Papa Chen's company. It was a commercial building in the city center. Papa Chen's company occupied 2 floors. Chen Qing had been waiting for him downstairs. When he saw Ren Baqian, he put his arm around Ren Baqian's shoulder and went up. The other party had already prepared the contract. Ren Baqian glanced at it and signed it. There was only one condition: he had to get the formula and ingredients within 6 months. There was nothing else that he needed to take note of. He wasn't worried that he would be cheated. If there was black mud cream in that world, there would definitely be other good stuff waiting for him to discover. If the Qin family cheated him, then he would only suffer a small loss, but the Qin family would suffer a greater loss. What he was most concerned about now was the 2 million yuan. This was the most urgent matter. After the contract was signed, the money was directly transferred to Ren Baqian's account. Chapter 16. After leaving the building with Chen Qing put his arm around his shoulder and asked, "What are we going to do now?" "Rent a house." Ren Baqian immediately replied. "Change to a bigger, quieter house." Other things were not urgent, but the problem of the house had to be solved first. The environment of the rented apartment was not good. There was only 1 bedroom, 1 living room, and 3 sides facing the sun. It was extremely hot in summer. Moreover, the landlord was nearby, and he kept disappearing and reappearing. He was always afraid of being accidentally discovered by others. With money in hand, there was no need to panic. The 2 of them went to a rental company and stated their requirements: spacious, bright, well-decorated, good environment, and quiet. Upon hearing this request, the other party immediately found the information of more than 10 houses on the computer, and all of them met his requirements. Prices range from the lowest 2,500 per month to tens of thousands. Ren Baqian looked through all of them once and took a fancy to one of them. It was a penthouse with 8 stories and 7 stories. The 7th floor had 2 bedrooms and 2 living rooms, while the 8th floor had 1 bedroom and 1 living room. There was also a large balcony of 50 to 60 square meters. The interior was decorated in a simple European style and looked very comfortable. Moreover, this house had an elevator. The environment of the community and the property management were all very good. Ren Boqian looked at the price. It was 7,500 yuan a month. He clenched his teeth and decided to go with it. The rent was 90,000 yuan a year, plus the agency fee of 75,000 yuan, the total was 97,500 yuan. His original monthly salary was only 3,200 yuan. Renting a house for a year cost 100,000 yuan, which made his heart ache. However, he would not be short of money in the future. Not to mention the black mud cream that he had collaborated with the Qin family, there were countless treasures in that world. At the thought of this, Ren Boqian felt better. "Let's go take a look at the house," Ren Boqian said. Seeing that Ren Boqian was interested in renting this apartment, the staff member was overjoyed. She could earn half a month's salary from this deal. He immediately took the key and brought the two of them to see the house. The house wasn't in the city center and was slightly more remote. Ren Boqian didn't care about this. After all, he still had to buy a car. After entering the neighborhood, Ren Boqian immediately fell in love with this place. There were greenery everywhere and it took up almost half of the area of the neighborhood. There weren't many people coming and going, and he could see some old people playing chess and chatting under the shade of the trees. After listening to the staff member's introduction, Ren Boqian walked around the house and felt extremely satisfied. Especially the balcony on the top floor, there were many flowers and plants on it. This is it. Ren Boqian decided on the spot. Upon hearing Ren Boqian's decision, the staff member immediately smiled. At least 2,000 yuan had fallen into his pocket. The next step was to sign the contract and pay the rent. The rent was paid every 6 months. Ren Boqian directly paid for a year's rent so that no one would disturb him. When everything was settled and the dust settled, it was already 1 p.m. Ren Boqian and Qin Qing went out for a meal and went to buy a car in the afternoon. A car was a man's concubine, but Ren Boqian rarely paid attention to information about a car. This was because with his salary, he didn't know how many years it would take him to save up for a car. Furthermore, he would have to do so without eating or drinking. As for his driver's license, he got it with the money he earned from his part-time job when he was in his senior year. At that time, he thought that it was better to be safe than sorry. Now, he could put it to good use. Although he did not know much about cars, he had a plan. An Audi A6L was not cheap. No one would roll their eyes at him no matter where he went. However, it was not too expensive either. At this time, he could afford it. He went straight to the Audi 4S shop, picked up the car, took out the insurance, got a temporary license, and left. Ren Boqian felt a little regretful when he left. It was a pity that he didn't bump into any acquaintances. Otherwise, he could pretend to be rich and see how they would react. It was rare for him to have such a chance to show his face. It was a pity that he didn't have this opportunity. From looking at the car to deciding on the deal, it took less than 15 minutes. It was as fast as one could imagine. Audi A6L, 2017 Deluxe Edition. A total of 660,000 yuan. All in all, it was less than 680,000 yuan. When the two of them picked up the car and left, the manager and salesperson were still waving at them. Their favorite customers were those who were rich, straightforward, and did not beat around the bush. After picking up the car, Ren Boqian didn't need Qin Qing to accompany him anymore. "I'm going to buy some daily necessities. What about you?" "I'm going back to take a look. Let's go out for dinner tonight." "Okay." After watching Qin Qing drive off, Ren Boqian went straight to the shopping mall. He stuffed the computer, bedding, and daily necessities into the car. Sitting in the car, Renbochin felt refreshed. It was good to be rich. He didn't need to think too much and just bought whatever he liked. Furthermore, he finally had his own car. As for the computer desk, there was one there. He didn't need to trouble himself. He first returned to his rented apartment, packed up the things that he wanted, and threw them into the car. Following which, he handed the keys to the landlord. As for the remaining half a month's rent, Renbochin couldn't be bothered to ask for it. "I've troubled you for the past few days." Renbochin shook hands with the landlord before he left. "You are rich." The landlord had already seen the new car downstairs. The license plate was even a temporary one. "Do you have my number? If you have nothing to do, come back and have a drink with me." "My treat." The landlord patted Renbochin on the back as he bade farewell. This landlord was a pretty good person. He would help Renbochin whenever he had any problems. He could even delay the rent for 2 days. Of course, if it was too long, he would still kick Renbochin out of the house. After bidding farewell to the landlord, Renbochin went downstairs to check the time. He gave Ching a call and arranged the meeting place. After waiting in the car for a while, Ching finally arrived. "Today, you changed your house and bought a car. These are all good things. After dinner, let's go and have some fun." Ching hooked his arm around Renbochin's neck the moment he saw him. "You just suffered a loss. Do you have a bad memory? Indeed, the knife didn't stab you, right?" Renbochin couldn't help but say. Hee, don't worry. They won't have the guts to do it again. Just this time, even my father was anxious. Ching laughed. "Moreover, you have established your career. No matter what, we have to celebrate it." After dinner, Renbochin followed Ching to the bar to have some fun. However, his luck wasn't too good that night. Although he didn't go empty-handed, there was only one girl who was pretty good in all aspects. As for the other two, Renbochin wasn't interested in them at all. In the end, he could only watch as Ching brought that girl to get a room. Renbochin, on the other hand, found a designated driver and returned to his new house under the resentful gazes of the two girls. After moving everything upstairs, Renbochin sat on the balcony for a while, enjoying the quietness of the surroundings and the occasional breeze. He thought to himself that this was what it meant to enjoy life. As for the original him, he had always been working hard to survive. It was also because he was lucky that he was able to travel back and forth. Otherwise, he would have followed his original plan and become an ordinary person that didn't attract any attention. The next day, Renbochin went to look for a housekeeping company to clean the house twice a week during the day. He didn't want to see the house covered in dust every 9 days. However, the bedroom on the second floor was prohibited from being cleaned by the housekeeping company. As he was afraid that someone would enter his room when he wasn't around, he specially installed a few surveillance cameras in the house. Its biggest use was to deter others. Chapter 17. After he was done, he gave his family a call. Originally, it was once every half a month. This time, it was a little more than a month. There was a female voice on the other end of the line. After the call was connected, she complained, "You still know how to call back." Renbochin laughed dryly and said, "I've been rather busy recently. I've set up a company with a friend, and I'm constantly on the move." "Company? What company? Where did you get the money to start a company?" When Renbochin's mother heard about the company, she immediately forgot about her complaints. She was afraid that her son would be cheated by others outside. "I'm providing the technology, and my friend is providing the money. Furthermore, a venture capital firm has taken a liking to it and has invested in it," Renbochin said half-truthfully. Explaining to his parents that he was a venture capitalist was much easier than explaining things like the black mud cream and pharmaceuticals. Otherwise, there was no way to explain the money in his pocket. After talking for a long time, he finally managed to convince his mother. Renbochin continued, I have transferred 300,000 yuan to your card. Both of you should spend it and have some fun. Why are you giving me money? It's not like your dad and I are short of money. The mother grumbled. However, it was a happy thing that her son had transferred 300,000 yuan. It meant that her son had indeed earned money. In the future, his relatives would not look down on him. Keep it for your and your brother's wedding gift, his mother said. You don't have to keep my betrothal gifts. I still have a lot of money here, and I didn't transfer all of it to you. I still have a few 100,000. If there's anything little brother likes, buy it for him. Renbochin laughed. After chatting for more than 10 minutes, Renbochin hung up the phone after his mother reminded him not to spend money recklessly and to save more. In the afternoon, Renbochin ran another lap. The work of the 10 odd job workers was very tiring. He had said that if they did a good job, he would not treat them unfairly. Therefore, he could not just make empty promises. Rewards were definitely out of the question. After thinking about it, Renbochin decided to get something to eat. Renbochin bought a lot of gabongzi roasted chicken, braised beef, and pork knuckles from the most reputable restaurant. It was enough to feed more than 10 people. The food in that world was much worse than that on Earth. After all, there weren't as many types of spices, and there weren't any recipes that had been continuously improved by generations. Renbochin reckoned that the amount of food on Earth would make those people lick their plates clean. As for wine, Renbochin gave up on the idea after some consideration. He could say that he made the food himself. Wine could not be brewed in a day or two. When he went to bed that night, Renbochin tied the 2 big bags of food to his body with a rope. When he woke up again, he was in the room that he had just been assigned to. It was already dawn outside, and the light was already shining through the paper window. Renbochin changed into coarse clothes, put away his things and food, opened the door, and walked out. A gust of extremely fresh air blew into his face. It was great to have unpolluted air. Renbochin felt fortunate that he would only be staying here for 3 days. Otherwise, if he had stayed here for too long, he didn't know if he would be able to adapt to the various types of waste air in YC City. In this world, people slept early and woke up early. At this time, some people had already started to wash clothes. Renbochin walked around the ice cellar and saw that 1/3 of the ice was already piled up. And this was under the condition that they had to supply the white bear. It could be seen that these people did not slack off at all on the day he left. However, the basin-shaped ice cubes were not easy to pile up. Renbochin was considering whether he should make a few custom square boxes to make ice. Not long after, many odd job workers arrived and greeted Renbochin. This made Renbochin, who had never been a class monitor since he was young and had always been a passerby, feel very good. They had to work for a while before going for breakfast. Renbochin asked, where do we go to forge things? If it's metal products, we have to go to the Baishur district. There are many workshops there. Someone understood Renbochin's intention and immediately replied. Is it troublesome to leave the beast park? Let's greet caretaker Shur and leave with a note. Renbochin nodded his head and said to everyone, work hard, I will treat all of you to a good meal tonight. Okay. Upon hearing this, everyone became excited. Breakfast was vegetable porridge, which was a mixture of coarse grains and vegetables. It didn't taste very good. However, it was still okay in this world. The odd job workers' meals were even worse than this. After breakfast, Renbochin looked for caretaker Shur and said, Caretaker Shur, I need to go out and forge a few metal boxes. I also need to go out to settle some matters today. If you are not in a hurry, you can come with me, caretaker sure said. Renbochin laughed, that would be the best. He did not even know where the gate was, let alone the so-called Baishur district. It was a good thing to have someone who was familiar with the surroundings and the local customs to go out with him. Otherwise, he did not know if he would offend other people's customs because he did not know. If that happened, he would be beaten up. After caretaker Sher finished his work, he changed into a set of clothes that were obviously of a higher quality and pulled Renbochin out. The beast park was connected to the palace. However, there were other exits in the beast park that were guarded by a few soldiers. Caretaker Sher flashed the token on his waist and brought Renbochin out. The next time you come out on your own, you have to use a note. Don't lose it, or you won't be able to enter, caretaker Sher warned Renbochin. Going in and out is easier than I thought. Otherwise what? No matter what, there should be more guards and more complicated checks, right? Otherwise, what if someone sneaks in? Caretaker Sher laughed heartily, why would it be so troublesome? The beast park belongs to Her Majesty, who would go there for no reason. Out of the beast park was a dirt road with woods on both sides. After walking for a distance, they arrived at a residential area. These are the residences of the various officials, caretaker Sher said to Renbochin as he pointed to the residences on both sides. After walking for a short distance, Renbochin heard a clamor in front of him. He saw two people fighting. Or rather, one person was riding on the other person and beating him up. Both of them were dressed in embroidered clothes and did not look like they were from ordinary families. There were also some people who looked like attendants watching the fight. Caretaker Sher brought Renbochin along as they walked past. Renbochin kept turning his head to look. This was really a case of fists hitting flesh. He could clearly hear the sound of fists landing on his face. Even he could feel the pain. The person on the ground suddenly retaliated. With a kick, he sent the person riding on him flying into the wall. He really flew into the wall and created a big hole. Renbochin gasped when he saw this scene. No one is going to do anything. Renbochin asked. What's there to do? It's just a fight, caretaker Sher said casually. I don't think anyone is going to help. Of course, they are drawing a circle. If someone interferes, they will be ridiculed to death, caretaker Sher said. At the same time, he warned Renbochin, if someone asks you to draw a circle, don't be afraid, just beat him up. Whether it's the officials in the imperial court or the commoners, just beat them up. Renbochin thought for a long time. Drawing a circle might mean a one-on-one duel. According to the literal meaning, whoever stepped out of the circle would lose. But can we even beat up the officials in the imperial court? Renbochin asked curiously. If he asks you to draw a circle, of course you can. But you can't ask him to draw a circle. If that's the case, the officials in the imperial court will be exhausted to death. Renbochin grinned. This seemed to be similar to the duels in some ancient countries. If you provoke any of the officials in the imperial court and they challenge you to a one-on-one duel, you can retaliate and beat them up. Furthermore, from caretaker Sher's words, it seemed that there was no need to worry about revenge. Renbochin measured his own physique. These days, all the people he saw were tall and strong. Their arms were big enough to run a horse. He reckoned that even if a few of him were to be tied together, he would not be able to defeat them. Looking at the situation of street fights in this world, Renbochin seriously considered whether he should carry a stun baton or pepper spray with him to protect himself. Do the officials in the imperial court often find people to draw circles? For example, what will happen if you offend them? Most people who offend them will only get their guards to teach you a lesson. Unless the other party is also an official in the imperial court. Do the officials in the imperial court also draw circles? Ren Boqian asked curiously. Of course, there are fights in the throne room every 2 to 3 days. A few days ago, the king of the nation and the general of the north were approved by Her Majesty to draw circles on the palace wall. At that time, there were many spectators below. Some of them went 1 day in advance to secure a spot. Ren Boqian felt awkward when he heard about drawing circles. However, after listening to Caretaker Shi, he had a direct understanding of Dao's intrepid customs. Even though he knew that the people of Dao were intrepid when they were drinking and chatting, but after listening to Caretaker Shi, he finally knew how intrepid they were. Fighting in the throne room every 2 to 3 days, and the Empress approved a one-on-one duel on the palace wall. Just thinking about it made his teeth hurt. Chapter 18. After passing through the court official's residential area, there were more and more people around. From what he saw these days, almost all the Dao people were well-built and tall. Most of the male commoners wore a vest, pants, and straw sandals. Their bronze-colored, strong chests were exposed, and almost all of them had 8-pack abs. The women wore tube tops, shorts, and occasionally short skirts made of animal skin. Their figures were slender and full of vitality. There were many aborigines and hunters in Dao. This kind of attire was convenient for them to move around. In addition, it was too hot here. It was estimated to be at least 40 degrees Celsius during the day. Wearing this kind of attire was more or less cooler. Ren Boqian saw many people carrying short knives and hunting bows. This made Ren Boqian, who had always lived in a stable and peaceful environment on Earth, feel very insecure. Even in ancient China, knives, spears, bows, and crossbows were regulated. But here, they could be seen everywhere. After walking for a short distance, Ren Boqian saw another chaos. This time, it was a quarrel between a few aborigines and a certain shop owner. Behind the shop owner were a few well-built men with sabers. However, their skin was fairer, and they were slightly shorter. Their clothes were also different from other Dao people. Those are the people from the Yun nation, those bastards who exploit people's marrow. Caretaker Shi glanced at them and said to Ren Boqian. It was obvious that he was very resentful. Before the two of them could go over, the two groups of people started fighting. Immediately, there was chaos. In less than a minute, someone flew out and fell heavily on the ground. After rolling on the ground, he rushed back into the fight. Ren Boqian looked at his small arms and legs. He reckoned that he could not even defeat a woman. This was simply too sad. Very quickly, a group of people wearing uniforms and carrying long knives appeared out of nowhere and separated the two groups of people. The aborigines and the few people behind the businessmen were taken away. As for the shop owner, he was naturally unharmed since he did not make a move. Didn't you say that you don't care? Ren Boqian asked doubtfully. We don't care about drawing circles, but we definitely have to care about this kind of street brawl, Caretaker Shi said. How will they be dealt with after being captured? 10 lashes, no big deal. After applying medicine and lying in bed for a day, they will be alive and kicking. However, those people from the Yun nation will probably lie in bed for another 2 days. Caretaker Shi laughed mischievously. He was full of schadenfreude. Why didn't they draw circles? Those cowards. Caretaker Shi's tone was filled with disdain. If the circle rejects you, you will be despised. But they don't care, Caretaker Shi explained. The people of the Yun nation are different from the people of Dao. They care more about money. Ren Boqian nodded. It was the same on Earth. It had become the norm to laugh at the poor and not at the prostitutes. In that case, they won't be able to take it if we keep looking for trouble and fighting every day. Ren Boqian was curious as to why Dao nation didn't use this method even though they hated those merchants so much. It won't happen every day. After all, not only will I have to buy medicine to apply after getting whipped, I'll also have to lie in bed for a day. Who would do such a thing? Moreover, which one of them didn't have dozens of guards? The officials in the court don't want to push them too hard. If they run away, who are they going to buy things from then? Ren Baqian understood. The people of Dao hated the greed of these merchants, but they couldn't live without them. Ultimately, it was because Dao lacked everything. In terms of basic necessities, food, housing, and transportation, more than half of them had to rely on external help. Those merchants were fearless because they grasped this point. At the same time, they didn't dare to push Dao Nation too hard. Ren Baqian admired the scenery on both sides of the road as he walked. There were all kinds of tall wooden houses, and most of them were 2 stories high. There was a stone wall separating the 2 houses. Ren Baqian guessed that the stone wall was used for fireproofing. This was to prevent a fire from burning down a large area. The shop signs on both sides of the road were also written with hieroglyphs, but they were different from Chinese characters. Ren Baqian didn't understand ancient Chinese characters and didn't know if they were similar to ancient Chinese characters. What opened Ren Baqian's eyes the most were the carriages that occasionally passed by. They could be considered as carriages for the time being. Most of them were pulled by creatures that looked like sheep, but their bodies were similar to cows. Occasionally, 1 or 2 deer-like creatures could be seen pulling the carriages. Ren Baqian's eyes suddenly stopped at a certain spot by the roadside. 2 chubby fellows were tied to the roadside and were moving around and playing. Their bodies were black and white, and their bodies were similar to a bull. They moved slowly, and there were 2 dark circles around their eyes. Aren't these pandas? Are they tied here just like that? Wait a minute. Ren Baqian shouted and ran to the side of the pandas to take a look. The 2 pandas were very small. When they stood up, they were only as tall as a human's knee. Their movements were very clumsy. One of them was climbing onto the other's body. As a result, when the other party moved, it immediately fell on its back. It turned around and saw that Ren Baqian was looking at it. It stuck out its tongue and acted cute. This is a flower bear. Its meat isn't very tasty, Caretaker Sure said casually when he saw Ren Baqian moving closer to the 2 pandas. The meat isn't tasty. Ren Baqian laughed dryly. If Caretaker Sure dared to eat pandas on Earth, not only would he be shot to death, but he would also be condemned by others to commit suicide. However, Caretaker Sure nodded seriously. There are many of these things on the mountain. They aren't tasty. Furthermore, they rarely attack people. People usually ignore them. What are they tied here for? Are they for sale? Ren Baqian was tempted. If he could raise 2 pandas, he would simply wake up from his dreams with a smile. The people of Dao couldn't understand the feelings the people of China had for pandas. After confirming that they were for sale, Ren Baqian shouted into the shop, "Anyone here?" The person who came out was a tall and burly man with a hideous scar on his face. There were also some Dao shop owners on this street. They made up about half of the shops. The items they sold were not as varied as those of foreign merchants. Most of the items they sold were from the mountain. How old are these flower bears? How much are they? Those 2 little playthings, about 3 to 4 months old. Give them to me for 3 taels. The burly man leaned against the door and said. 3 taels. Ren Baqian was stunned. It was too cheap. It was almost the same as buying a dog on Earth. Caretaker Sure, can I bring them back to raise? Ren Baqian turned his head and asked. You can raise them, but they eat a lot. Caretaker Sure didn't understand why Ren Baqian wanted to buy 2 flower bears. I want them. Ren Baqian couldn't even be bothered to bargain. He immediately bought the 2 pandas. But I will leave them with you first. I will come back to collect them. Sure. The burly man nodded. After Rinpoche paid the money, he laughed foolishly from time to time. He didn't expect to have the opportunity to raise pandas. When he arrived at Baishur district, there were many shops selling all kinds of swords, bows, and arrows. Occasionally, he could also see some choppers, kitchen knives, and farming tools. Rinpoche found a shop and explained his purpose of coming. There were a total of 5 sets of metal boxes, one big and one small. The small box was placed inside the big box. Every box just had to be equipped with a handle. Rinpoche only had one request. It was to have less rust and not break easily. He didn't care about anything else. This kind of box was very simple and could be made by a shop. 1 set for 1.5 taels. 5 sets for 7 taels. The shop owner directly said. Okay. After all, the metal products in this world were slightly more expensive than those on Earth. This was not unexpected. After paying half of the money, Rinpoche's task was considered completed. Following which, Rinpoche and caretaker Sher went to a few other places in the city and ordered some things. These were the food for the animals in the beast park. When the time came, they would be sent directly to the beast park. Rinpoche thought of the 2 little fellows and specially bought some bamboo leaves to send to the 2 little fellows. Originally, he wanted to pay, but caretaker Sher stopped him. The beast park consumed a lot of food every month. It was not a big deal to ask for some bamboo leaves. The shop owner laughed heartily. After understanding that Rinpoche wanted to rear 2 flower bears, he said that he would send him some bamboo leaves every time he delivered food. In any case, the 2 bears were cubs. When he went to the beast park, he just needed to send some bamboo leaves. Finally, he bought some inferior wine. Since he wanted to reward the 10 odd job workers for their hard work, how could there be food without wine? The wine was called thorny fruit wine. It was slightly red in color and contained impurities. Rinpoche tasted it. It was very bland. He estimated that it had only a few degrees of alcohol. Furthermore, it tasted very strange. It was said that it was made from a type of fruit. 2 taels of silver could buy half a barrel, which weighed about 15 caddies. Although it wasn't cheap, it was much cheaper than the so-called hard liquor that cost 2 taels of silver per caddy. At noon, they randomly found a place to eat in the city. After all, caretaker Sher's income wasn't very high. Rinpoche was currently relying on the silver rewarded by the emperor. He didn't know when he would receive his own salary. What surprised Rinpoche was that there was actually Rujiamo in this world. Although the ingredients used were different, it was actually Rujiamo, right? The meat sandwiched inside had a strong odor. Although the seasoning was average, the meat was fresh and tender. Rinpoche quite liked it. He ate 2 pieces that were bigger than a palm in a row. As for the bread sandwiched outside, it was made from coarse grains. It wasn't very tasty, but it had a unique flavor. During this period, Rinpoche also asked about the black mud cream and where he could buy it. Chapter 19. Chen Medicine Shop, this is it. Caretaker Sher pointed to a sign in the distance. Rinpoche memorized the location. It was getting late. He would go there next time to discuss and see what he could use to exchange for the prescription and raw materials. On his way back, Rinpoche inquired about this Chen Medicine Shop. It was said that it was a family from Great Xia who had been living here for more than 30 years. Their medical skills were superb, they were good people, and their fees weren't expensive. Most of the time, they were allowed to delay the payment for treating the Aborigines. They would only pay after they returned from hunting. The people of Dayo were straightforward and would definitely repay any kindness. Very few of them did not return with money. Those who did not return would most likely stay in the mountains forever. Therefore, even though they were outsiders, most people respected the owner of this medicine shop. Back at the shop that sold the pandas, the owner even gave them a bamboo basket and some bamboo leaves. It wasn't a lot, but it was just enough for the two little chaps to eat for 2 meals. Renbochin carried one of them. It was furry and soft, but it had a little smell. The little chaps couldn't stay still in his arms and moved around curiously. This made him extremely happy. Renbochin placed the 2 chaps in the basket and only revealed their heads to look around. Upon returning to the house in the Beast Park, Renbochin released the 2 little chaps. The 2 little chaps stared blankly on the ground for a while before cautiously checking their surroundings. From time to time, they would bump into something or fall. Renbochin liked these 2 silly chaps from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't help but carry them and rub his face against them. He didn't mind their smell at all. After thinking for a long time, he came up with names for the 2 pandas. The one that licked his face a few times just now was called Tian Tian, and the one that kept falling was called Gun Gun. After naming them, Renbochin was happy again. Most people kept cats and dogs. Warriors kept bears. Wealthy people in the Middle East kept leopards. Renbochin was probably the only one who kept pandas. If he brought them back to the streets, well, what awaited him wouldn't be envious gazes, but the police. He took out the food that he prepared and smelled it. There was no problem. However, if he left it for another night, it would probably start to stink. Renbochin went to the ice cellar. After a day, the ice cellar was filled to the brim. All right, let's eat. I will reward everyone today with food and wine. As soon as Renbochin finished his announcement, everyone cheered. Then, he called Caretaker Shur and the other 3 caretakers of the Beast Park over and moved 3 tables outside. Among them, Caretaker Shur's position was the highest. The other 3 caretakers were 1 rank lower. Renbochin was a newcomer and had the fewest subordinates. Renbochin, Caretaker Shur, and 3 other caretakers sat at 1 table. The other odd job workers sat at the other 2 tables. When the dishes that Renbochin had prepared were sent over, the chef eagerly ran over and asked with a smile, "Caretaker Ren, how did you make these dishes?" Needless to say, it was obvious that he had stolen a bite. "You want to know?" Renbochin laughed. The chef hurriedly nodded, his eyes shining. "When the meals are ready, I will teach you a thing or 2, Renbochin said as he slapped the chef's back. "All right, let me know what you want to eat in the future." The chef's face was full of joy. Just now, he smelled the aroma of the dish and secretly ate a little. The material was not very good, but the taste was simply endless. After all, the recipe had been improved over hundreds of years, and the ingredients were made with various seasonings. The simple cooking methods in this world could not be compared to it. When the dishes were served, Renbochin raised his cup and said, "Brothers, I will have to trouble you to take care of me in the future." "Ha, you are treating me like an outsider. However, you look skinny and weak, but you are not a bad person." Caretaker Shur laughed. He had only been here for 2 days, and he was already treating everyone to a meal. He was not the kind of person who did not know anything. Caretaker Shur felt comfortable dealing with such a person. The other caretakers also raised their cups. Renbochin downed the wine in 1 gulp and then said to the odd job workers, "Now, we are all in the same boat. If the higher-ups give it to me, it will be the same as giving it to you. If you do well and the higher-ups are satisfied, I will not mistreat you. If you don't do well, all of us will have to suffer the consequences. Therefore, in the future, everyone will work together with me." "All right, we will listen to Caretaker Shur. Whatever Caretaker Shur says, we will do it." The 10 of them loudly agreed. At this time, everyone began to drink and eat. Caretaker Sure had just put a piece of pork knuckle meat in his mouth when his eyes lit up. Usually, what they ate was boiled in salt water. At most, they would add 1 or 2 spices, which was considered good. However, compared to the food that Rinpoche took out, it was like heaven and earth. He wasn't the only one who felt this way. Even the others felt the same way. All of them swung their arms and stuffed the food into their mouths. In particular, the odd job workers started to cheer and praise the food as soon as they drank the wine. From time to time, they would scold each other as they fought over the food. The status of odd job workers in the Beast Park was not as low as in the feudal society. After all, they were all 7-foot-tall men who could fight and kill. It was not impossible for them to survive outside the Beast Park. The odd job workers here were all recruited. Their status was similar to that of commoners, and no one looked down on them. Rinpoche sat among the crowd and was surrounded by tall, strong, and upright men. He was very happy when he drank. It was much more enjoyable than eating with those people on earth who were always scheming. "Where did you get these dishes?" Caretaker Sure asked Rinpoche after half a round of wine. "I made them. I will make more delicious food for you next time. However, it is troublesome to make them, and I need to prepare them in advance." Rinpoche laughed. "Good." Caretaker Sure slapped Rinpoche's back and almost slammed him off the table. "After eating today's food, I feel that the food I ate in the past is really disgusting." "That's right. After eating these, I reckon that I won't be able to eat tomorrow." Another caretaker, who was still drunk, shouted at the others. The few of them agreed loudly. Although Rinpoche had just arrived, the few of them liked him because of this meal. After half a round of wine, he had become brothers with the few of them. Just as everyone was drinking to their heart's content, a few people walked over from afar. They were all wearing armor. 2 of them were acquaintances. They were the ones who sent Rinpoche over. Rinpoche and the others stood up to welcome them. They wanted to see what was going on. "Send some ice to the palace. Also, you will follow them." A soldier pointed at Rinpoche and said. Rinpoche found this person familiar and immediately remembered that he was the person who sent the ice to the emperor. Rinpoche wasn't drunk from the light wine. After hearing this, he immediately sobered up and asked softly, "What's the matter?" "Her Majesty is summoning you." "Just follow her," the guard replied. After that, he whispered, "The weather is hot these days, and Her Majesty has no appetite. Didn't you say that you know how to make delicious food from all over the world?" Rinpoche gritted his teeth. If they had come a little earlier, he would have cut some beef and brought it over. However, he didn't have anything on hand now. His culinary skills were just as so-so. The Empress had eaten countless good food. The food that he cooked was something new to her. He didn't have much confidence that the Empress would praise him like these people. Furthermore, he didn't know much about the spices and food in this world. It seemed like he could only go and take a look at the situation first. "Thank you, brother." Rinpoche cupped his hands and called out to the odd job worker, "Aren't you going to send the ice to the palace?" He then turned to the few caretakers and said, "Please enjoy your food. I will make a trip to the palace." Chapter 20. Rinpoche cupped his hands at the caretakers and called for a few odd job workers to move a cart of ice. Then, he followed the guards into the palace. The palace gate was connected to the Beast Park. After checking the ice and the guards, he let them in. The last time Rinpoche was here, he was thinking about how to stay alive and didn't have much time to look around. This time, he was much more relaxed. In general, the buildings in Dayo were very rough. Most of the buildings in the palace were made of stone with some simple carvings. It fully displayed the rough nature of Deo. However, Renbochin found it interesting. After all, there were too many exquisite gardens on Earth. This kind of rough exotic style was fresh to him. When they arrived at a palace, a few people were waiting outside. The guard who reminded him earlier went in to report. Not long after, the guard came out and waved at everyone, "Send the ice in." Then, he said to Renbochin, "Follow me." After leaving the crowd, the guard said to Renbochin, "Her Majesty wants you to make some exotic food. Do it well." "Thank you." Renbochin cupped his hands. "How should I address you, brother?" "My surname is Shur." "Just call me Shurhu," the guard said with a smile. "Brother Shurhu and caretaker Shur are from the same family?" Renbochin asked curiously. "We are from the same village." After chatting for a while, Renbochin thought of something. "Besides Her Majesty, who else is in the palace? I didn't see many people on the way here." "There are also some maids and odd job workers." "Then, there are us guards," Shurhu said. Renbochin was slightly surprised that there were no eunuchs in this world. After walking for more than 10 minutes, they arrived at a big courtyard. Inside, there were dozens of people bustling about. This was the imperial kitchen of the palace. It was in charge of the emperor's meals. If there were other people from the imperial family, they would also be in charge here. As for the food of the guards, odd job workers, and maids, there were other places. The supervisor of the imperial kitchen was a tall and fat man. He didn't know if all the chefs were like this, but most of them were. In particular, the chefs here had to study all kinds of dishes every day and try all kinds of things. They had to eat everything one by one, so it wasn't strange for them to become fatter. "Caretaker Go, this is Caretaker Ren from the Beast Park. Her Majesty doesn't have a good appetite today, so she asked him to prepare some exotic delicacies," Shurhu introduced Caretaker Ren to the imperial kitchen. Hearing this, the fatty's face was obviously unhappy. He immediately flared up. "Since when is it the Beast Park's turn to cook? Who is it for?" "Caretaker Go, be careful with your words," Shurhu said in a deep voice. Caretaker Go then realized that his words seemed to be scolding Her Majesty. He hurriedly said, "I didn't mean it. Please don't blame me." The weather has been hot these past 2 days, and His Majesty's appetite isn't good. He didn't eat much for lunch today, Shurhu continued. "It's my fault." Caretaker Go lowered his head and said, "No matter what, it was the fault of the imperial kitchen that His Majesty did not eat much. As for whether the weather was hot or not, it was not an excuse. This Caretaker Ren is from the outside world and is proficient in culinary skills. Hence, Her Majesty asked him to prepare some exotic delicacies. The imperial kitchen receives your orders." Caretaker Go cupped his fists. Then, he said to Renbochin, "Come over here, just tell me what you need. I want to see what kind of exotic delicacies you can make." It was obvious that even though he agreed verbally, he still had a lot of resentment in his heart. After all, the imperial kitchen was his territory. The chefs in the imperial kitchen had absolute confidence in their own skills. If a chef were to display his culinary skills, they might be willing to learn from him. However, a caretaker from the Beast Park came to cook for the Empress. This made them feel uncomfortable. Previously, Renbochin saw that Caretaker Go didn't quibble and directly admitted his mistake. Hence, he had a good impression of Caretaker Go. However, since Caretaker Go didn't like him, there was no need for him to build a good relationship with Caretaker Go. As long as he could make something that satisfied the Empress, it would be fine. The main part of the imperial kitchen was a huge room inside. There were 2 slightly smaller rooms beside it. Renbochin entered the biggest room and took a look. There were all kinds of vegetables that he had never seen before. There was also a lot of meat at the side. The first thing that Rinpoche noticed was the seasoning. He tasted them one by one. Salt, brown sugar, a sweet and sour fruit core, soy sauce, vinegar, a spicy fruit, a ginger rhizome, and a jar of weird meat sauce. These were all the seasoning that the imperial kitchen had. It was much scarcer than what Rinpoche had imagined. He reckoned that any ordinary household in China would have more seasoning than this. Just like that, the group of chefs from the imperial kitchen looked at Rinpoche with arrogance. They wanted to see what he could make. Rinpoche boasted that his culinary skills were average. He definitely couldn't make anything good with these ingredients. As for relying on the taste of the ingredients themselves, Rinpoche didn't even understand the ingredients here. What could he make? How is it? What do you want to make? Caretaker Go looked down at Rinpoche and asked. Rinpoche was slightly disappointed. Just these few ingredients aren't even enough to make zhaojiang noodles. Upon hearing this, Caretaker Go got angry on the spot. The whole world is filled with these ingredients. The imperial palaces of Great Xia, the Yun nation, and the Qin nation also have these ingredients. Don't blame us for not having enough ingredients if you are not good enough. Rinpoche grinned. His culinary skills weren't that good, but if he ordered all these ingredients, he would have more choices. Furthermore, the imperial palaces of Great Xia, the Yun nation, and the Qin nation also had these ingredients. Rinpoche didn't really believe it. You are a chef from the imperial kitchen of Dayo, how would you know what other countries have? Furthermore, I heard that there are countries to the west of Great Xia and to the south of the Qin nation. Maybe these countries can get some seasoning from other places. Even though Rinpoche didn't say anything, the non-committal expression on his face made Caretaker Go unbearably angry. The people from your beast park came to the imperial kitchen to cook for Her Majesty, and you still think that we don't have enough ingredients? This is simply too infuriating. If you are capable, then come and manage this imperial kitchen. Caretaker Go forcefully suppressed his anger and asked coldly, what do you want? Rinpoche shook his head slightly. He could naturally tell that Caretaker Go was unhappy. But your ingredients are not complete. They are simply too few. Seeing him like this, Caretaker Go got even angrier. What do you want? As long as you have it, I can find it for you. If you don't have it, then honestly say that your culinary skills are bad and get lost back to the beast park. Do you have MSG? Do you have pepper? Big ingredients. Cumin. Sesame paste. Do you have pepper? Cinnamon. Rinpoche counted 7 or 8 types with his fingers. Then, he raised his head and asked, do you have these? If you can take one out, it will do. Caretaker Go was stunned. After thinking for a long time, he asked Rinpoche, what are they? Rinpoche roughly described the taste of the pepper and big ingredients. After listening, Caretaker Go was furious. Are you kidding me? You are spouting a bunch of nonsense. I have never heard of any of these ingredients. If Her Majesty wasn't waiting for you today, I would have beaten you out. That's why I said that your ingredients are not complete. Rinpoche still shook his head. His expression of, you are indeed ignorant, I am not wrong, made Caretaker Go explode in anger. Take out those ingredients and let me see if they are really as you said. If not, I will not let you off. Even if I report this to Her Majesty, I will not let this matter rest, Caretaker Go shouted at the top of his voice, causing dust to fall from the roof. The other chefs in the imperial kitchen also followed suit and scolded. Where did you get the courage to spout nonsense? Don't just rely on the fact that Her Majesty specifically asked you to come over and criticize the imperial kitchen. There is no such thing as what you said. You came to the imperial kitchen to spout nonsense. Don't you know what the people here do every day? The people in the beast park know how to cook. Caretaker Go was so irritable that he even cursed out loud. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.